Chapter 25-27. What are you doing? It's such a joyous occasion. Why are you crying? On the contrary, the old man in sackcloth was the calmest. After all, she had been to the gates of hell, so her state of mind would definitely change. Hearing this, the two white-haired old men wiped away their tears and smiled. Schweer, who gave you this pill? Hurry up and tell us. If there's a chance, we must thank him properly. The two of them looked at the girl and asked. The girl in white said, From what everyone is saying, his name seems to be Libuer. What? Libuer. The two white-haired old men were shocked. Seeing their reaction, the old man in sackcloth asked, Do you know him? Yes, he's a disciple of the dragon god Pallas, and he has the protection of a paragon. He's a bit strong-willed. I really didn't expect it to be him, the two of them said. Since he's a disciple of the dragon god Pallas, you must take good care of him. Also, if there's a chance, invite him to our home. I want to thank him in person, the old man in sackcloth said. All right, the two of them nodded. The girl in white suddenly thought of something, looked at the two white-haired old men and said, Grandfather, second grandfather, he might be in trouble right now. What trouble? The two of them looked at her suspiciously. When I was in the treasure pavilion, I wanted to enter the 10th floor, but I was stopped by the people there. The woman in white explained the situation in a simple and clear manner. 5-clawed golden dragon. Pretending to be dragons? The two of them were shocked, but when they regained their senses, they smiled bitterly and said, As expected of this kid, Holy Dragon City. Did you hear? This Libu did something earth-shattering again. What is it? Pretending to be dragons. What? He even dares to pretend to be dragons. This guy is really as bold as the rumors say. Pretending to be dragons is a capital offense. This time he's probably angered the dragons. I wonder what will happen to him. To be honest, I quite admire him, because among the younger generation, he is the only one who dares to openly challenge the dragons. Everyone was discussing animatedly, and a storm was brewing in the city. It was the same for the treasure pavilion. The auction had already begun. However, everyone's eyes were locked on a certain spot in the front row. Surprisingly, a young man was sitting there. It was Qin Feiyang. As for the 5-clawed golden dragon, it shrunk to the size of a palm and lay on Qin Feiyang's shoulder, taking a nap. Although its body had shrunk and it had retracted its dragon might, it was still dazzling. Now let's auction a supreme-grade divine artifact. The starting price is 50 million, and there is no upper limit. On the auction stage, an old man was holding an auction in full swing, in a room on the first floor. No way! He even dares to impersonate dragons? A chubby middle-aged fatso was sitting beside the coffee table. He looked at Ren Xiaolan, who was standing opposite him, and said in surprise, Yes. Ren Xiaolan nodded and blamed herself. It's all my fault. I didn't see through it immediately, and even let them enter the 10th floor. This is not your responsibility. You don't have to blame yourself. The middle-aged fatso was the manager of the treasure pavilion in Holy Dragon City. He wore a gorgeous robe, had a broad body, and a fat head with big ears. A normal chair wouldn't be able to accommodate his body. Thank you, manager. Ren Xiaolan breathed a sigh of relief. The middle-aged fatso pondered for a while and looked at Ren Xiaolan. Go and keep an eye on him now, but remember, don't do anything offensive. Can't offend. Why is that? Ren Xiaolan was suspicious. Didn't you mention the rumors about him? He even dared to kill the island master of the dragon god Pallas. Moreover, he has the support of the hall master of the law enforcement hall. Can we afford to offend such a person? You just need to keep an eye on him and let the dragons settle this matter. The middle-aged fatso said. I see. Ren Xiaolan suddenly understood and nodded. I understand. I'll go now. With that, she left the room and walked toward the auction house. The middle-aged fatso pondered for a while and also took out the image crystal. Auction house! Ren Xiaolan walked quickly to Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, Young master, Please follow me to the VIP room. VIP room? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes, our auction house has a total of 3 floors. This is the lowest floor, and the 2 floors above are the VIP rooms, Ren Xiaolan said. Okay. Qin Feiyang thought for a while and nodded with a smile. After Qin Feiyang left with Ren Xiaolan, the people around suddenly became restless. He was actually invited to the VIP room. Isn't the treasure pavilion afraid of offending the dragons? What are you thinking? Do you think the treasure pavilion really treats him as a VIP? You can't even understand this. I really admire you. Let me tell you. On the surface, the treasure pavilion is inviting him to the VIP room, but in reality, they are keeping an eye on him and waiting for the dragons to come. After all, this Li Bu-er has an ultimate powerhouse by his side, and the treasure pavilion doesn't want to offend him. I see. Looks like there will be a good show to watch later. Upstairs, in a VIP room, Ren Xiaolan pushed open the door and walked in with Qin Feiyang. The VIP room wasn't big. The decorations weren't very luxurious either. There were 3 chairs and a coffee table. In the corner, there were a few pots of green plants. In front of them was a transparent, floor-to-ceiling window, and they could clearly see the auction stage below and hear the sounds outside. Young master, please take a seat. Ren Xiaolan pointed at the chair next to the coffee table and smiled, then squatted down to make tea. Qin Feiyang was suspicious and suddenly remembered the situation on the 10th floor. He frowned and said, "They're all for the dragons?" "Not all of them. If someone wants a 4th grade divine furnace and a 4th grade divine furnace and a 4th grade divine fire and above, they can find our steward and exchange for it with treasures of equal value." Ren Xiaolan said. "I see." Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, "Then what do you mean when you said it's not to make money?" "Every once in a while, a 4th grade divine fire or a 4th grade divine furnace will be auctioned. In fact, it's a special benefit to repay everyone's support for the treasure pavilion. Even if the final price is really only 10 divine crystals, our treasure pavilion will complete the transaction without hesitation." Of course, this kind of thing has never happened before. Ren Xiaolan smiled. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. That was for sure. Once a 4th grade divine fire and a 4th grade divine furnace and above were put up for auction, there would definitely be a mad scramble. Naturally, it would be impossible for them to be sold at the price of 10 divine crystals. In fact, in the end, this was a gimmick to win people's hearts. The treasure pavilion was so smart. How could they make a loss? If Sir wants a divine fire and a furnace, you can actually find the steward to make a private transaction, because it's too much of a waste of time in the auction house. Ren Xiaolan suggested. It's indeed a waste of time, but I don't have treasures of the same value. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Sir, you're too modest. Ren Xiaolan shook her head. Not only did he have supreme experts protecting him, but he could also refine divine pills. How could such a person not have treasures of the same value as a 4th grade divine fire and a furnace? However, after working in the treasure pavilion for so many years, she already knew what to say and what not to say. There were some things that could not be exposed. Not long ago, on the 10th floor, she had already broken a taboo by pointing out that the 5-clawed golden dragons were pretending to be dragons. So, she could not do it again. 50 billion. 51 billion. The price of the 4th grade divine fire quickly soared by more than 50 billion. Qin Feiyang glanced at the people present and smiled faintly. 100 billion. Li Bu-er. He's not an alchemist. Why is he here? He even raised the price to 100 billion. Do you have too much money to burn? Qin Feiyang just casually opened his mouth, but the whole place fell silent. There was a trace of fear and hesitation in everyone's eyes. Chapter 25-28. They were afraid because of Qin Feiyang's usual strength and the supreme expert behind him. Moreover, he even dared to impersonate dragons and didn't run away. Instead, he sat in the auction house openly. Was such a person someone they could offend? They were hesitant because it wasn't easy for them to wait until the auction of the 4th grade Divine Fire. It would be a pity to give up. After some internal struggle, everyone finally chose to give up on bidding. Although this person impersonating dragons would definitely bring about a disaster, no one knew what would happen in the end. Therefore, it was better not to offend this person for the time being. The old man on the auction platform was also a little surprised by the result. Why did everyone give up when this person opened his mouth? The auction was a fair competition. Was there a need to be so afraid? Although this was a reward for the benefits given out by everyone, it was too much of a loss to trade for 100 billion divine crystals. 100 billion. Is there anyone else who wants to raise the price? The old man looked around the auction house and asked unwillingly, but no one responded. This made the old man feel helpless. Ren Xiaolan covered her mouth and laughed. Young master, you're quite influential. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. This result was not out of his expectations, and this was the effect he wanted, so that he wouldn't waste the divine crystals. The old man said loudly, since no one wants to raise the price, then I announce 200 billion. However, before the old man finished speaking, a faint voice sounded from the VIP room opposite. 200 billion? He knows it's Li Bu, but he still wants to raise the price, and he's doubling the price. Interesting. Everyone was slightly stunned and looked at the VIP room in unison. The old man on the auction platform also faintly smiled. I knew it. With so many people here, there must be a few who weren't afraid of Li Bu. This voice is a little familiar, Qin Feiyang whispered, and also looked at the VIP room opposite. It's him. Rin Xiaolan said. Who? Qin Feiyang asked. Do you still remember the 2 young men in luxurious clothes who exposed your impersonation of dragons on the 9th floor? This person is one of them, Ren Xiaolan said. It seems to be them. Qin Feiyang nodded and remembered. He called out a bid at this time, and even doubled it, just like you. He's clearly provoking you, Ren Xiaolan said. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly as he looked at the auction stage and said, 201 million. For 100 billion. The luxuriously dressed youth in the opposite VIP room spoke without hesitation. 500 billion. Qin Feiyang said again. 1 trillion. The voice on the other side sounded again. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. When the price was raised to 201 billion, the other party didn't hesitate to raise it to 400 billion. Next, he raised it to 500 billion. And the other party doubled it to 1 trillion. The other party was indeed provoking him. I've finally met a tough opponent. I'd like to see how this guy ends up. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang's VIP room with schadenfreude. Ren Xiaolan glanced at the opposite VIP room and looked at Qin Feiyang, saying, Young master, a tree needs a layer of bark to live, and a man needs a breath of breath. But before Ren Xiaolan finished speaking, Qin Feiyang said, I give up. What? He actually gave up? Ren Xiaolan was stunned. The people around the auction house were also stunned. They thought that this person would continue to compete, but they didn't expect him to give up so easily. In the opposite VIP room, the 2 luxuriously dressed youths also looked at each other. What was going on? They had just started, and he actually gave up? Li Bu, you and your accomplice have done so many earth-shattering things. You shouldn't be short of divine crystals, right? You're not playing anymore. Isn't that too boring? The 2 of them spoke with a hint of sarcasm. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Accomplice? Earth-shattering things. Not short of divine crystals? Why did it sound like there was a hidden meaning in their words? Could it be that these 2 people knew that he was the one who ransacked the various city, lord mansions in the north? But how was that possible? Is there anyone else who wants to bid? The old man looked around the auction house and focused on the VIP room where Qin Feiyang was. But no one spoke. Qin Feiyang ignored them and looked at the VIP room opposite, his eyes flashing with cold light. Seeing that Qin Feiyang didn't speak for a long time, the old man announced the result. Qin Feiyang also retracted his gaze and stood up. Ren Xiaolan was slightly stunned and hurriedly asked, "Young master, where are you going?" "Back to the Dragon God Palace." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "You're going back now. Young master, did you come to our treasure pavilion for the 4th grade divine fire?" Ren Xiaolan asked. "You can say that." Qin Feiyang smiled. Ren Xiaolan nodded in realization and asked, "But if you leave now, how am I going to explain it to the manager?" Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, "That's good. Take me to see your manager." "What do you want to do?" "Young master, the manager was forced to do this. After all, you're pretending to be dragons in our treasure pavilion. As the person in charge of the treasure pavilion, he must give the dragons an explanation." Ren Xiaolan hurriedly said, thinking that Qin Feiyang was going to hurt the manager of the treasure pavilion. "Don't be nervous. I know the treasure pavilion's situation. I won't make things difficult for him. I'm just going to talk to him about a business deal." Qin Feiyang smiled. "That's good." Ren Xiaolan heaved a sigh of relief, got up, and led Qin Feiyang to the first floor. After a while, the two of them arrived in front of a door. "Dong!" Ren Xiaolan reached out and gently knocked on the door. "Come in." A voice sounded from inside. Ren Xiaolan pushed the door open and led Qin Feiyang in. The manager of the treasure pavilion sat at the desk and glanced at Ren Xiaolan. When he saw that Qin Feiyang was behind Ren Xiaolan, his expression changed immediately. He hurriedly got up and greeted them. "Brother Li, you've graced my treasure pavilion with your presence. I hope Brother Li will forgive me for not going out to welcome you." He looked extremely nervous. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and looked at Ren Xiaolan. "I'll talk to the manager in private first." Ren Xiaolan looked at the manager of the treasure pavilion. The manager waved his hand and said, "Go out and wait." Ren Xiaolan turned and walked out, closing the door behind her. "Brother Li, please take a seat." The manager of the treasure pavilion invited Qin Feiyang to sit at the coffee table and served him the best tea leaves. "There's no need to go through so much trouble. You don't have to be so nervous. I'm just here to talk to you about a business deal." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "Business deal?" The manager of the treasure pavilion was stunned and asked in confusion, "What business deal?" Qin Feiyang said, "I need a divine level alchemy fire above the 4th grade." "Alchemy fire?" The manager of the treasure pavilion was a little surprised. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "May I ask if you're an alchemist?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. The manager of the treasure pavilion was very surprised. This person was famous for his arrogance, but he didn't expect him to be an alchemist. Why hadn't he heard of him before? "Actually, whether I'm an alchemist or not doesn't have much to do with the alchemy fire I'm buying, right? There's no rule in this world that says you have to be an alchemist to buy alchemy fire, right?" Qin Feiyang said faintly. Yes. I've offended you. Please forgive me, Brother Li." The manager of the treasure pavilion was stunned and quickly smiled obsequiously. Qin Feiyang said, "Then name your price." The manager of the treasure pavilion hesitated and said with a smile, "To be honest, Brother Li, we don't sell alchemy fires above the 4th grade. We only exchange them with treasures of the same value." "Of the same value?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "Of course. For you, Brother Li, we can relax the conditions." The manager of the treasure pavilion said again. "Why?" Qin Feiyang looked at him in surprise. "The treasure pavilion is just a business place. We don't want too much trouble." The manager of the treasure pavilion said it very carefully and tactfully, but the meaning was obvious. He hoped that Qin Feiyang wouldn't cause trouble in the treasure pavilion and bring trouble to the treasure pavilion. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "To be honest, I really admire the way the treasure pavilion does things. It's just doing business. Brother Li, you're too kind. How about this? I'll give you a cluster of 4th grade alchemy fire. Take it as a gift from the treasure pavilion." The manager of the treasure pavilion smiled. "Give it to me." Qin Feiyang smiled and shook his head. "I don't dare to accept such an expensive gift. Moreover, I need more than 1 cluster. How many do you want?" The manager of the treasure pavilion asked. 3 clusters of 4th grade alchemy fire. 3 clusters of 5th grade alchemy fire. If there are 6th grade or 7th grade ones, I'll accept them all. Also, I want an alchemy furnace. The higher the grade, the better," Qin Feiyang said. "So many?" The manager of the treasure pavilion was shocked. "It's a little too much, but I believe it's not difficult for the treasure pavilion." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "This." The manager of the treasure pavilion hesitated and said, "How about this, Brother Li? Go back first. I'll ask the chief pavilion master for his opinion. I'll contact you then." "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded, opened the altar and walked up. After Qin Feiyang disappeared, the manager of the treasure pavilion sneered. He looked at the closed door and said, "Ren Xiaolan, come in." Ren Xiaolan had been waiting outside the door. When she heard that, she immediately opened the door and walked to the manager of the treasure pavilion. The manager of the treasure pavilion asked, "You've been watching him for so long. Do you know that he's an alchemist?" "Yes." Ren Xiaolan nodded and recalled what happened on the 10th floor not long ago. She said, "He seems to be able to refine elixirs." "What? He can refine elixirs?" The manager of the treasure pavilion stood up suddenly, his face full of shock. At that time on the 10th floor, he did take out a freshly refined elixir, but I don't know if he refined it himself, because when he took out the elixir, he went to the space treasure. Rin Xiaolan said. Hearing that, the manager of the treasure pavilion slowly returned to his seat. He pondered for a while and shook his head. He probably didn't refine it. How so? Ren Xiaolan was suspicious. He's just an immortal. How can he refine elixirs of this level? Moreover, we've never heard him say that he's an alchemist before. I think it must be the immortal by his side who helped him refine it. The manager of the treasure pavilion said self-righteously. Ren Xiaolan nodded and asked, "Then why did he look for you?" It's really funny. He actually asked me for 3 clusters of 4th grade elixir fire, 3 clusters of 5th grade elixir fire, and 3 clusters of 6th grade elixir fire. The manager of the treasure pavilion sneered. Chapter 25-29. Sure enough, it's for the elixir fire. Ren Xiaolan mumbled and asked, "What did you say?" She had already thought of this when she heard Qin Feiyang say that he wanted to look for the steward. Of course, I wouldn't agree to it. I just made up an excuse and told him to get lost. The treasure pavilion steward said lightly. Aren't you afraid of angering him? Ren Xiaolan was surprised. He can't even protect himself by pretending to be dragons. What am I afraid of? Just wait and see. His death date is not far away. The treasure pavilion steward sneered. Ren Xiaolan smiled and didn't say anything else. She looked at the treasure pavilion steward and said, "If there's nothing else, I'll get back to work." Okay. The treasure pavilion steward nodded. Ren Xiaolan left the room and turned to close the door. There seemed to be a hint of worry in her eyes. At the same time, in the room, the treasure pavilion steward took a sip of tea and sneered. "Do you really think I'll buy your elixir fire? You're really naive and ridiculous." After saying that, he leaned on the chair and crossed his legs. He closed his eyes and shook his legs constantly, looking like he was floating in the air. However, he didn't know. All of this was seen by everyone. And this person was Qin Feiyang. In fact, he didn't leave before. When he was about to be teleported away by the altar, he entered the ancient castle and stayed in the room. So, he had heard every single word that the Treasure Pavilion's manager had said. Fire Lotus looked at the steward in the image and asked curiously, Qin Dage, how do you know he's lying to you? It's very simple. As a businessman, if he really wants to do business, he will definitely take the initiative to establish a contract with the other party before he leaves to facilitate communication. And before this, although he made it sound very nice, he didn't mention a single word about establishing contract. This means that he's just being perfunctory. Of course, if he's just being perfunctory, I won't be angry. But his attitude and the words he said to Ren Xiaolan are not just perfunctory, but also a kind of arrogant contempt. He thinks that in front of him, everyone else is a fool and he's the smartest. Qin Feiyang said lightly. Fire Lotus smiled. Then, how do you plan to deal with him? The show has to be played one step at a time. Take it slow. Qin Feiyang smiled and waved his hand, dispelling the image. Then, he drove the ancient castle away from the treasure pavilion. Boom! But at this moment, a terrifying dragon might descended. The people entering and exiting the treasure hall were immediately startled as they raised their heads to look at the sky above the treasure hall. A middle-aged man was standing in the air. He was about 8 meters tall and had an imposing appearance. He wore a dazzling golden robe. A 5-clawed golden dragon was embroidered on his clothes. Li Bu-er, come out now. The golden-robed middle-aged man looked down at the treasure pavilion and shouted. Sure enough, he has come to settle accounts with Li Bu-er. But who is this guy? Looks like it's very impressive. The crowd mumbled as they sized up the golden-robed middle-aged man. Tap, tap! Along with the sound of hurried footsteps, the manager of the treasure pavilion ran out and hurriedly went up to greet him respectfully. Greetings, my lord. Where is Li Bu-er? The golden-robed, middle-aged man asked. The manager of the treasure pavilion smiled apologetically. He has already returned to the Dragon God Palace. Returned to the Dragon God Palace. The golden-robed, middle-aged man raised his eyebrows and said angrily, Didn't I tell you to keep an eye on him? I can't do anything about it. After all, he has supreme experts protecting him. I can't stop him even if I want to. The manager of the treasure pavilion complained tearfully. Useless trash. The golden-robed middle-aged man glared at the manager of the treasure pavilion and opened an altar. The manager of the treasure pavilion of the Holy Dragon City is actually bowing down to a junior of the dragons. What an eye-opener. At this moment, Qin Feiyang appeared in the crowd below and looked at the manager of the treasure pavilion with a faint smile. Li Bu-er, when did he come? The people around immediately looked at Qin Feiyang. Why is he still here? The manager of the treasure pavilion lowered his head and looked at Qin Feiyang with a stunned expression. He then transmitted his voice. Brotherly, please don't cause trouble here. Why? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. The manager of the treasure pavilion said anxiously, Didn't we agree to not bring trouble to the treasure pavilion? Did we? Why don't I remember? Qin Feiyang smiled mockingly and ignored the manager of the treasure pavilion. He looked at the golden-robed middle-aged man and asked, What's the matter? The manager of the treasure pavilion was anxious. What did this mean? Why did his attitude change in the blink of an eye? You're Li Bu-er? The golden-robed middle-aged man sized up Qin Feiyang and asked. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. The golden-robed middle-aged man said, I'm the patriarch of the Golden Dragons. The patriarch of the Golden Dragons. I didn't expect him to come to the treasure pavilion personally. After knowing the identity of the golden-robed middle-aged man, everyone's eyes were filled with fear. So, it's the patriarch. It's an honor to meet you. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. Don't play dumb with me. let the five-clawed golden dragon come out immediately. I'd like to see when you gave birth to such a descendant. The patriarch of the golden dragons snorted. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and said, "Little Gold, come, let him take a look." "I'm not a pet. What are you looking at?" The five-clawed golden dragon complained in dissatisfaction, but it also flew out from Qin Feiyong's wrist and floated beside Qin Feiyong. The patriarch of the golden dragons looked up and down at the five-clawed golden dragon, and his eyes were fixed on the five-clawed golden dragon's fifth dragon claw. His eyes suddenly shone. It was really a five-clawed golden dragon. One had to know. In the entire golden dragon clan, only he and the ancestral dragon had a fifth dragon claw. Even his true descendant did not have a fifth dragon claw. But now, a golden dragon that came out of nowhere actually had five dragon claws. This was too unbelievable. In other words, the five-clawed golden dragon's bloodline power was even purer than his true descendants. "Are you done looking?" The five-clawed golden dragon looked at the patriarch of the golden dragons impatiently. The golden dragons took a deep breath and asked, "Where are you from?" "Related to you?" The five-clawed golden dragon raised his eyebrows. The patriarch of the golden dragons said angrily, "All the dragons in the world are related to us dragons. If I ask you to answer, then answer." This emperor only listens to the young master. If the young master asks me to answer, then I will answer. As for you, sorry, I'm not familiar with you. After the five-clawed golden dragon finished speaking, he returned to Qin Feiyong's wrist. The patriarch of the golden dragon's face darkened in an instant. "Li Buer, do you know that impersonating dragons is a capital offense?" The patriarch of the golden dragons pointed his spear at Qin Feiyong again. "Impersonating dragons is a capital offense? Then I'd like to ask, what crime is it for you dragons to impersonate us humans?" Qin Feiyong laughed. The patriarch of the golden dragons frowned and said, "When have we ever impersonated you humans?" "You dragons are all in human form. Aren't you impersonating us humans?" Qin Feiyong said. "Impersonating human form is impersonating us humans?" The patriarch of the golden dragons was angry and amused. How could there be such an unreasonable person? Since even you guys aren't impersonating us, then how can Xiao Jin be considered impersonating us? Could it be that he's not a dragon god? Qin Feiyong said. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but mutter. The five-clawed golden dragon was a dragon god. Since he was a dragon god, then he should be considered a dragon. In this way, the five-clawed golden dragon really wasn't impersonating him, because he was a dragon himself. The patriarch of the golden dragons shouted, "Although he is a dragon god, he has not been recognized by us dragons. Without recognition, he is not a member of us dragons." Wait, there's some contradiction in your words. Since you said that Xiao Jin is not a dragon, then why did you say that all the dragons in the world are related to you dragons? Qin Feiyong looked at the patriarch of the golden dragons suspiciously. For a moment, the patriarch of the golden dragons was at a loss for words. If I understand correctly, the name dragons is a collective name for the dragon god clan. The dragons in the world belong to the dragons. Just like us humans, we are collectively known as the human race. Whether it's the divine land, the four major domains, or other places, as long as you are a human, you are a member of the human race. Or is my understanding wrong? In front of you, only the dragons of Divine Dragon Island are considered dragons? If that's the case, then where do you place the dragons that are scattered outside? Patriarch, whether you are a human or a dragon, you have to be reasonable, don't you think so? Qin Feiyong said with a faint smile. The patriarch of the golden dragons was extremely angry. How could this mouth be so powerful? His words made him unable to refute. Qin Feiyong coughed and said, "Patriarch, don't get me wrong. I don't mean to offend you. I'm just being reasonable." The Golden Dragon tribe leader said angrily, "So you're saying that if I punish you today, I'll be the one being unreasonable?" "I don't know if you're reasonable or not, but I believe that justice is in people's hearts," Qin Feiyong said with a smile. The Golden Dragon tribe's leader was so angry that he laughed. "What a sharp tongue," he said. "It doesn't matter if you're being reasonable or not. You have to give me an explanation today." "What explanation do you want?" Qin Feiyong asked. "You have two choices. First, let the five-clawed golden dragon go to Divine Dragon Island with me and promise to cut off all ties with the five-clawed golden dragon. I will pretend that this never happened. Second, you can continue to be arrogant, but you and the five-clawed golden dragon will be finished. I know that you have a supreme expert protecting you, but half-step invincible realm expert is nothing in front of us dragons. As for that young man, I'm afraid he can't come to help you in time." The golden dragon's eyes flashed coldly. "You are so confident. It seems that you have come prepared. Who else is there? Come out." Qin Feiyong smiled and glanced at the void. Whoosh! As Qin Feiyong's voice fell, two figures appeared beside the golden dragons. It was the white-clothed woman and the 10th elder. "Greetings, Patriarch Dragon." Everyone present immediately knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully. At the scene, only Qin Feiyong was standing. Looking at the white-clothed woman and the 10th elder, Qin Feiyong said with a smile, "Even the two of you are here. What an honor." "Say yes. Although what you said is reasonable and the five-clawed golden dragon is a dragon, it is undeniable that he pretended to be the son of the golden dragons. In the end, you are still guilty." The white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyong and said. Chapter 2530. Qin Feiyong looked at the woman in white and said, "So, I have no choice." "Yes." The woman in white nodded. "Pretending to be the son of the golden dragons. What other choice do you have? Also, you were in the wrong in the first place, but instead of admitting your mistake in time, you even talked big and said a lot of reasons to defend yourself. Li Bu-er, are you such a hypocrite?" Suddenly, two sneers sounded in the crowd. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. This voice, he immediately looked in the direction of the voice and saw two young men in luxurious clothes standing not far away, looking at him with a cold smile. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with a cold light. He had no impression of these two people, which meant that he had never seen them before. He had never seen them before, but he kept provoking him? Was there something wrong with his brain? Hearing this Li Bu-er is really a hypocrite. When the crowd heard the words of the two young men in luxurious clothes, they pondered for a while and nodded. Qin Feiyong was speechless. Were these people brainless? Were they so easily incited? The other party was the evil dragons. As humans, shouldn't they be united against the outside world? Besides, he tried his best to deal with the dragons, and even fought a bloody battle with the dragon sovereign and the other ancestral dragons in the internal sea. Why? Wasn't it to overthrow the rule of the dragons and let humans be the masters? But what did these people do? Nothing was done. It didn't matter if they didn't do it, but could they shut up? But they didn't shut their mouths. They only knew how to join in the fun and make a fuss. What was the use of these people? Now he couldn't help but wonder if it was worth it to risk his life for these ignorant people. Li Bu-er, did you see that? This is already the will of the people. Quickly make your decision, the woman in white said. Qin Feiyong looked down at the five-clawed golden dragon and said with a smile, "Shao Jin, do you agree?" The five-clawed golden dragon said indifferently, "If you agree, I have no objections." "You rascal." Qin Feiyong shook his head, speechlessly. He looked up at the woman in white and said, "As your companion, I can't hand him over to you. Don't worry about it. If it comes to us dragons, not only will we not harm it, we will even do our best to nurture it." The woman in white said, "This emperor doesn't like hearing this. Your cultivation is only slightly higher than mine. What can you cultivate? The five-clawed golden dragon roared. The white-clothed woman was bewildered. It seems that you still haven't seen through this emperor's strength. The five-clawed golden dragon smiled proudly as a monstrous aura erupted from him. The surrounding crowd was immediately sent flying, each and every one of them in a sorry state. The treasure pavilion was also shaking violently. Rumble. In the end, with a rumbling sound, the treasure pavilion collapsed. Dust and smoke billowed, and countless treasures were buried underneath. The people in the treasure pavilion also ran out with ashen faces. They looked at the five-clawed golden dragon in horror. "Brotherly, what are you doing?" The manager of the treasure pavilion shouted. In the blink of an eye, the treasure pavilion was razed to the ground. How was he going to explain this to the chief pavilion master? Qin Feiyang glanced at him and said telepathically, "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" The five-clawed golden dragon smiled secretly. He was doing this on purpose. He had long disliked the steward of the treasure pavilion. How dare he play tricks in front of them without thinking about his own strength? Destroying the treasure pavilion was considered a light punishment. He'd better not offend them again, or his head would be smashed. But at this moment, the manager of the treasure pavilion was the only one who cared about the collapse of the treasure pavilion. The others turned a blind eye to it. Even the staff of the treasure pavilion, such as Ren Xiaolen, looked at the five-clawed golden dragon with fear on their faces. This aura was so strong. The white-clothed woman, the chief of the golden dragons, and the 10th elder all stared at the five-clawed golden dragon in shock. The five-clawed golden dragon floated beside Qin Feiyang and looked at the three of them proudly. "Now, do you still think that I need your nurturing? What's his cultivation level?" Why is even the ancestral dragon so surprised? People muttered. The white-clothed woman took a deep breath and looked at Qin Feiyang. "I didn't expect that there would be a beginner Immortal Realm expert lurking around you." "What? Beginner Immortal Realm? I thought he was only a half-step Immortal Realm expert, but I didn't expect him to be a beginner Immortal Realm expert." People were shocked to the extreme. A beginner Immortal Realm, five-clawed golden dragon, and a half-step Immortal Realm expert. Who is this Li Bu-er? You were joking just now. Even if the young master wants me to go to Divine Dragon Island with you, I won't agree. Although the dragons are strong, you can't compare to the young master in some aspects. The five-clawed golden dragon sneered. Like the time array, there were definitely dragons, but could they compare to the castle and the Black Tortoise realm? Moreover, there were still seals in the castle. When these seals were unlocked, it would be even more terrifying. The most important thing was their character. The dragons were far inferior to Qin Feiyang in terms of character and handling of affairs. For example, the golden dragon ancestral dragon's body. If it were the dragons, they would never allow him to fuse. After all these years together, he already understood what kind of person Qin Feiyang was. Such a loyal and righteous person was hard to find in this world. How could he be willing to leave? Can't compare to him? The white-clothed woman raised her eyebrows. "I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. If you really want to fight, we're not afraid." The five-clawed golden dragon smiled disdainfully. Although there was no blood and Qin Feiyang couldn't open the slaughter domain, there were more than a dozen heaven-defying artifacts in the castle. Just these heaven-defying artifacts were enough to kill the white-clothed woman and the other two. Presumptuous! You're simply not putting the dragons in your eyes. Lord Ancestral Dragon, Lord Patriarch, and Lord 10th Elder, can you bear such arrogant words? Two angry shouts sounded. It was the two well-dressed young men fanning the flames again. "Damn you! Young master, I'll go and kill them." The five-clawed golden dragon was furious. "No hurry. Deal with the dragons first." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Anyway, these two people had already entered his must-kill list. Sooner or later, he would kill them. There was no hurry. However, before he killed them, he had to figure out one thing. He had a feeling that these two people were targeting him again and again. It didn't seem to be that simple. Sure enough, the two's instigation worked. The 10th elder hated Qin Feiyang to begin with. Hearing the two's words, his killing intent was naturally aroused. He transmitted his voice. Lord Ancestral Dragon, since the young man isn't here, we can't miss this opportunity. Lord Ancestral Dragon, I also think that we can't keep him alive. The golden dragons secretly said. The white-clothed woman's eyes flickered. Suddenly, a trace of killing intent appeared in her eyes as a powerful aura spread out. Are we still going to make a move? Qin Feiyang whispered. Since that was the case, then let's get rid of these three people. However, how should he hide his identity? He couldn't just directly expose his true identity. How about this? Let Hui or Frenzy transform into your appearance and kill them with a heaven-defying artifact. The five-clawed golden dragon secretly said. Good idea. Qin Feiyang secretly smiled. Not only could he get rid of these three people, but he could also continue to hide his identity. It was the best of both worlds. Although the three of them had left their divine consciousness on Divine Dragon Island and couldn't really kill them, their physical bodies were priceless treasures, especially the white-clothed woman. As the ancestral dragon, her physical body was equivalent to a divine treasure. Have mercy. However, just as Qin Feiyang was about to take action, an old voice rolled over. Swish! Following closely, a white figure rushed in front of the white-clothed woman like lightning. Yi Zhong! The white-clothed woman and the other two were stunned. When did this old man come back? Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon also had a suspicious look. The white-clothed woman came back to her senses and asked, Yi Zhong, your family's matter. It's all been taken care of. Yi Zhong nodded and looked down at Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon. He looked at the white-clothed woman and said, Come with this old man. After saying that, he rushed towards Yun Shao. The white-clothed woman frowned and chased after him. What's going on? Everyone looked at the back of the two in confusion. Yun Shao. Yi Zhong finally stopped. The white-clothed woman also stopped beside Yi Zhong and said, My condolences. My condolences. Yi Zhong was slightly taken aback, shook his head and smiled. I think you've misunderstood. My father is not dead. Not dead? The white-clothed woman was startled for a moment and asked doubtfully, Didn't you say that his time is up? Yes, but my granddaughter found a life-saving divine pill by chance. Father extended his life by 100,000 years. Yi Zhong laughed. It can't be. What divine pill? The white-clothed woman was surprised. I'm not sure either, but this divine pill is indeed useful. This time, I'm actually here to protect Libur. Yi Zhong said. Protect him? The white-clothed woman was still surprised and asked suspiciously, Why do you want to protect him? Yi Zhong said, I believe you should also know that he pretended to be dragons to help someone. The white-clothed woman nodded and said, I heard it seems to be a little girl. Yi Zhong said, This little girl is my granddaughter. What? Your granddaughter? The white-clothed woman was stunned. Was there such a coincidence? Yi Zhong smiled and said, To tell you the truth, the divine pill that helped my father extend his life was given by him. It's actually him? The white-clothed woman lowered her head and looked at Qin Feiyang standing on the street, her eyes full of disbelief. Libu, pretended to be dragons to help my granddaughter, and he saved my father, so now he is my benefactor. I can't let anything happen to him. Yi Zhong said. The white-clothed woman shook her head and smiled bitterly. She never thought that this matter would be related to Yi Zhong. Also, Do you really think that killing him is the best choice? Yi Zhong said again. What do you mean? The white-clothed woman was suspicious. Although I have been accompanying my father for more than a year, there are people who report to me what happened in the Dragon God Palace. For example, he killed Wang Darren and the other two. Also, he and Frenzy killed Gu Fan and the others. The strength they've displayed has already far surpassed their cultivations. Shouldn't we cherish such a talent? Why do we want to get rid of them? Yi Zhong said. Chapter 25:31. The woman in white remained silent. No matter what, nothing can happen to Li Bu'er. Otherwise, Xue and the old man will be angry. I can't go against my conscience. Yi Zhong looked at the woman in white with a firm attitude. The woman in white shook her head and smiled. To be honest, I admire him too. Yi Zhong was surprised. After killing Gu Fan and the others, I asked them personally. Do you know? Both of them have a heaven-defying technique. The woman in white said. I know. Lin Hua told me about it. Yi Zhong nodded. The woman in white said. Lin Hua should know about you too. What did they say? Yes. Although they offended the dragons again and again, they were actually on the dragon's side. Yi Zhong said. The woman in white said. After leaving, I was thinking about whether I should let them join the dragons. That's great. They have your heavenly god technique. In time, they might be able to fight against Qin Feiyong. Yi Zhong said. That's what I thought too. But I have my concerns. This concern is their identity. They have a heaven-defying technique and the protection of an immortal. Now, they even have a 5-clawed golden dragon. Would you believe me if I told you that his identity is simple? And that young man, his strength is almost on par with ours. Although he seems unreliable, his heart is as clear as a mirror. Have you ever wondered what kind of people they are? What if they're a match for us dragons? The woman in white said worriedly. Our dragons only have the Dragon Slayer Palace? You suspect that they're from the Dragon Slayer Palace? Yi Zhong frowned. The woman in white said, We can't rule out that possibility, right? Yes. But why did the people of the Dragon-slaying Palace come to our Dragon God Palace? And they'll be controlled by the fate contract after entering the Dragon God Palace. Yi Zhong said. The white-clothed woman continued. Don't forget, Qin Feiyong will be able to undo the fate contract. In the end, all of this is just your personal guess. Yi Zhong shook his head. That's right. It's also possible that they have nothing to do with the dragon-slaying palace. But if we want them to join the dragons, we must first figure out their origins. After the battle in the inland sea, we dragons have suffered heavy losses. We can't afford any more accidents. The white-clothed woman sighed. Yi Zhong was silent for a while and said, How about this? Don't worry about it. Leave this matter to me. You'll deal with it? The white-robed woman was stunned. Yi Zhong smiled and said, You can't be doubting this old man's ability, right? I wouldn't dare. The white-clothed woman smiled and nodded. All right then, I'll leave it to you. In any case, when you return, I'll have to leave the Dragon God Palace and return to Divine Dragon Island. Let's go then, Yi Zhong said. The two immediately flashed and landed in the sky above the treasure pavilion. How will they deal with Li Bu'er? Do you even need to think about it? He won't be able to escape death. Seeing the two of them come down, everyone began to whisper to each other. Li Bu'er. Yi Zhong glanced at the crowd and looked at Qin Feiyong. Speak, Qin Feiyong said lightly. He had never had a good impression of Yi Zhong. What an arrogant boy. Yi Zhong snorted and asked, Are you willing to join the dragons? What the hell? Join the dragons? Qin Feiyong was stunned. What the hell? The others were also stunned. Shouldn't he be punished for making such a mistake? Why did he let him join the dragons? What the hell was going on? The chief of the Golden Dragons and the 10th Elder also looked at Yi Zhong in disbelief. It was different from what they had expected. What was this old man Yi trying to do? Yi Zhong asked, "Are you willing to join?" No. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Yi Zhong was not surprised by this answer, but the others were extremely speechless. What kind of person was Yi Zhong? He was Long Zun's most trusted human. He was also the only person in the world who could freely enter and leave the divine Dragon Island. Moreover, even a mystical dragon like the Golden Dragon tribe leader had to be courteous in front of Yi Zhong. It could be said that Yi Zhong's position in the dragons was very important. However, in the face of Yi Zhong's invitation, this person actually refused? This guy's brain must have been kicked by a donkey. How lucky was this? But then again, Li Bu'er had made such a big mistake. Not only was he not punished, but he was even allowed to join the dragons? No matter how one looked at it, it seemed like he was being rewarded. Strange. What was Yi Zhong trying to do? If you don't want to join, I won't force you. Let's take a step back. I will accept you as my disciple. Are you willing? Yi Zhong smiled. What? Everyone looked at each other. What was Yi Zhong trying to do? Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at Yi Zhong. His eyes were full of suspicion. One had to know. There were many grudges between him and Yi Zhong. Logically speaking, now that there was such a good opportunity, this old man should take the opportunity to get rid of him. But why did he still want to accept him as his disciple? Why did he seem to be a different person after disappearing for a while? Was he helping him? Or could it be that Yi Zhong was plotting something else? Yi Zhong's behavior was too abnormal. If it was anyone else, they would be suspicious, let alone Qin Feiyang, who was always vigilant. Kid, I am helping you. If you don't join the dragons and become my disciple, I can't help you. Moreover, it's not a loss for you to take me as your master, because I have never taken in a disciple in my life. You are the first. Moreover, as long as you become my disciple, you will be able to save a lot of unnecessary trouble in the Dragon God Palace. Yi Zhong transmitted his voice. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he couldn't help but frown. Was he really helping him? But why was that? He didn't believe that Yi Zhong was a good person. This was really puzzling. However, Yi Zhong's last sentence was right. Becoming Yi Zhong's disciple would definitely save him a lot of trouble. After all, Yi Zhong was the chief hall master of the Dragon God Palace. In the future, he would be second only to one person in the Dragon God Palace. The most important thing was, this was also a good opportunity to get close to Yi Zhong, because in order to complete the task given to him by the ancestors, he first had to get closer to Yi Zhong. After thinking about it, Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said, "Disciple Li Bu'er greets master." He agreed. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. They all thought that Qin Feiyang would still refuse like before, but they didn't expect that he would actually agree. Then, wouldn't his current status rise along with the tide? The disciple of the chief hall master of the Dragon God Palace was basically standing at the top of the pyramid of the Divine Land. Very good. Yi Zhong nodded and smiled. How could this be? Not only was he not punished, but he also became Yi Zhong's disciple. In the crowd, the two well-dressed young men's faces were extremely gloomy. This was too dramatic. And the manager of the treasure pavilion, at this moment, he also had a face of disbelief. He thought that this person would definitely die, but he didn't expect that he would rise to the sky in one step. Now, even his treasure pavilion couldn't afford to climb up. In his heart, he couldn't help but regret. No. There's still a chance to save him. Anyway, he doesn't know what I planned to do before. As long as I find him the alchemy fire, I'll definitely be able to build a good relationship with him. The manager of the treasure pavilion muttered. At the same time, Qin Feiyang also looked at the manager of the treasure pavilion and the two well-dressed young men, and a sneer flashed in his eyes. Immediately, Qin Feiyang looked up at Yi Zhong and said with a smile, "Master, this disciple wants a greeting gift." The corner of Yi Zhong's mouth twitched. This was really impolite, but with so many people watching, he couldn't refuse, so he asked, "What do you want?" Qin Feiyang pointed at the two well-dressed young men and said, "I want their heads." What? The two well-dressed young men's faces suddenly turned pale, and Yi Zhong, the woman in white, the 10th elder, the chief of the Golden Dragons, and the others all looked at the two of them. He actually wanted the heads of the two of them. Did they have some sort of grudge? Qin Feiyang said, "Master, this disciple only has such a small request. You won't refuse, right?" Yi Zhong smiled bitterly. This kid really knew how to climb up a pole. "Okay." Yi Zhong nodded and looked at the 10th elder, saying, "10th elder, kill them." The 10th elder was very unhappy at this moment, but he really didn't dare to disobey Yi Zhong's words. "Qin Feiyang, I didn't expect you to be so ruthless. We were just joking with you, and you actually want to kill with a borrowed knife." Seeing the 10th elder make a move, the two well-dressed young men's expressions immediately changed, and they transmitted their voices to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. They actually knew his true identity. "If you really want to do this, then don't blame us for being ruthless and exposing your identity in public. Think about it yourself." The two of them continued to transmit their voices. Qin Feiyang's pupils contracted, and he looked at the 10th elder and said, "Stop!" The 10th elder was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "I was just joking to liven up the atmosphere." "Joking?" The 10th elder was immediately annoyed and said angrily, "How can you make such a joke?" Yi Zhong's face was filled with helplessness. What kind of young man was this? Cough, cough. 10th elder, please mind your identity. I'm now the disciple of the chief hall master, and I'm his only disciple. Save me some face in front of so many people. Qin Feiyang coughed and said, "You." The 10th elder was furious. Was he going to use Yi Zhong's power to act like a tyrant? He didn't expect that he had the potential to be a good-for-nothing. The white-clothed woman and the Golden Dragon's chief also turned to look at Yi Zhong with an extremely strange expression. It was as if they were asking if it was wise to accept him as a disciple. Yi Zhong laughed dryly and waved his hand. Okay, this matter is over. Li Boer, if there's nothing else, go back to the Dragon God Palace. Don't mess around outside." "Yes, master." Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. "Let's go." Yi Zhong looked at the white-clothed woman and said with a smile. The white-clothed woman shook her head and turned to return to the Dragon God Palace. The 10th elder glanced at Qin Feiyang, snorted from his nose, and turned to leave angrily. The Golden Dragon's chief looked at the 5-clawed Golden Dragon floating beside Qin Feiyang, and also left with a trace of unwillingness. To be honest, he really wanted to take the 5-clawed Golden Dragon away. But now, this boy had become Yi Zhong's disciple. Yi Zhong's position in the dragons was higher than his, so it was really difficult for him to make a move. His heart was full of regret. But fortunately, this boy had become Yi Zhong's disciple, so he would be considered a member of the dragons in the future. The 5-clawed Golden Dragon that followed this boy naturally belonged to the dragons. At least it didn't benefit outsiders. Chapter 2532. The 5-clawed Golden Dragon said, "Qin Feiyang, is Yi Zhong out of his mind today?" "I think so." Qin Feiyang nodded. Everything that had happened today was completely out of his expectations. "I think you have to be careful. This old man must be plotting something." The 5-clawed Golden Dragon reminded him secretly. "I know." Qin Feiyang responded and looked at the two young men in luxurious clothes, but he was stunned. There was actually no trace of the two of them. When did they run away? But the others didn't leave. They all looked at Qin Feiyang in awe. "Brotherly, congratulations. The manager of the treasure pavilion ran to Qin Feiyang with a flattering smile. Qin Feiyang ignored him and glanced at the crowd. The two young men in luxurious clothes were indeed gone. Earlier at the auction house, when he heard the conversation between the two of them, he already had this thought, but he rejected it, because only the people of the dragon-slaying palace knew his identity. Even very few people in the dragon-slaying palace knew about it. However, he didn't expect that the two of them would know his identity just as he thought. Why didn't they expose him? There was only one explanation. They were also from the dragon-slaying palace. Moreover, the two of them were on the opposing side of the dragon-slaying palace. Otherwise, it was impossible for them to provoke him again and again. But what role did they play in the dragon-slaying palace? Brotherly? Seeing that Qin Feiyang ignored him, the manager of the treasure pavilion looked a little embarrassed and spoke again. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. He came back to his senses, looked at the manager of the treasure pavilion, and asked, "What's the matter?" The manager of the treasure pavilion said with a smile, "I've asked the chief pavilion master about the deal you proposed not long ago." "Really?" Qin Feiyang looked at him playfully. The manager of the treasure pavilion was shocked. Why did he feel like he had been seen through? He nodded and said, "Yes, I did." Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, "What did the chief pavilion lord say?" Chief Pavilion Master said that it's just a few clusters of alchemy fire. It's a small matter. The Treasure Pavilion Manager smiled flatteringly. Hypocrite! Ren Xiaolan stood in the crowd and heard the words of the Treasure Pavilion's manager. A trace of disdain crept into her eyes. "Small matter?" Qin Feiyang chuckled and said, "I thought your Treasure Pavilion wasn't willing to do business with me." "Of course not. It is the Treasure Pavilion's honor to do business with you, brotherly," the supervisor of the Treasure Pavilion said with a smile. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. He looked at Ren Xiaolan and beckoned, "Come here." "Me?" Ren Xiaolan was a little stunned. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. Ren Xiaolan walked up to Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Take out your image crystal." Ren Xiaolan was even more puzzled and took out her image crystal. Qin Feiyang also took out his image crystal and established a contract with Ren Xiaolan. He said, "If I need anything in the future, I will send you a message and you can help me deal with it." "Okay." Ren Xiaolan nodded and was secretly delighted. This person was now the disciple of the chief hall master. It was an honor to establish a contract with him. Moreover, in the future, with this relationship, she would definitely be valued by the Treasure Pavilion and have a meteoric rise from then on. On the other hand, the Treasure Pavilion manager's expression was a little ugly. As the manager of the Treasure Pavilion, this person did not establish a contract with him, but chose to establish a contract with an ordinary staff member. Wasn't this deliberately making things difficult for him? Qin Feiyang looked at the Treasure Pavilion manager and said with a smile, "Remember what I'm about to say. In the future, I will only do business with Ren Xiaolan." The Treasure Pavilion manager's expression froze. Ren Xiaolan was pleasantly surprised. This was already an undisguised care for her. "Goodbye." Qin Feiyang waved at Ren Xiaolan and turned to leave. "Farewell, young master." Ren Xiaolan bowed. "Ren Xiaolan, I really didn't expect you to be so good at pleasing people." The Treasure Pavilion manager sneered. Ren Xiaolan's expression froze. She looked at the Treasure Pavilion manager suspiciously and asked, "Sir Manager, why do you say that?" "You know very well in your heart. I asked you to keep an eye on him, but you went to curry favor with him. Maybe you even did something shameful with him in the VIP room." The Treasure Pavilion manager thought to himself, "Sir Manager, tell me clearly, what shameful thing? I can understand that you are dissatisfied with me, but you can't insult my character. Besides, I'm also working for the Treasure Pavilion," Ren Xiaolan said angrily. "Humph." The Treasure Pavilion manager snorted and looked at the crowd around him. What are you looking at? What's there to look at? Get lost." When the crowd heard this, they immediately dispersed. Qin Feiyang was not afraid of the treasure pavilion manager, but they were, because in the eyes of ordinary people, the treasure pavilion manager was like a god. The treasure pavilion manager looked at the staff of the treasure pavilion and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and rebuild the treasure pavilion." The group of staff immediately got busy. Rin Xiaolan sighed secretly and also joined in the rebuilding of the treasure pavilion. The treasure pavilion manager looked at Rin Xiaolan with a sneer in the depths of his eyes. Outside the city, on a certain mountain peak, Qin Feiyang stood alone at the edge of the cliff, looking at the mountains below with flickering eyes. As for the 5-clawed golden dragon, it was still clinging to Qin Feiyang's wrist. "Little Jean, if those two are really from the Dragon Slayer Palace, what do you think I should do?" Qin Feiyang suddenly said, "So what if they are from the Dragon Slayer Palace? Since they dared to provoke us, they should be prepared to die." The 5-clawed golden dragon was full of hostility. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, taking out the image crystal. Buzz! After a while, Jiang Dafei's virtual image appeared and said respectfully, "Greetings, young lord." Qin Feiyang nodded. "I was just about to go to the treasure pavilion to look for you, but I heard what happened there and thought that you had already left." "Congratulations," Jiang Dafei said with a smile. "What's there to congratulate?" Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Becoming Yi Zhong's disciple is one step closer to the plan. Shouldn't I congratulate you?" Jiang Dafei was suspicious. Qin Feiyang shook his head and asked, "Are you done with your business?" Jiang Dafei nodded. "Then come and find me." Qin Feiyang told Jiang Dafei the coordinates of his current location. "Okay, by the way, Lei Bing and Wang Qi heard that I was going to the Black Tortoise World to cultivate, and they want to go with me. Do you agree?" Jiang Dafei asked carefully. Wang Qi. Qin Feiyang was suspicious. He had spent some time with Lei Bing, so he knew that he was a spy in Serpent City. However, Wang Qi was a stranger to him. Jiang Dafei said, "Wang Qi is from Snow Dragon City, and he is now the city lord. His cultivation is the same as mine and Lei Bing's, the complete 9th Heaven Realm." "I see. Then let them come with me," Qin Feiyang said. "Thank you, young lord. I'll inform them right away." Jiang Dafei thanked him and turned off the image crystal. A moment later, 3 figures appeared behind Qin Feiyang. One of them was Jiang Dafei. One of the other 2 was a burly man in black. The other was a white-haired old man. He was stooped, but his eyes were sharp. The black-haired man was Lei Bing. The white-haired old man was undoubtedly Wang Qi. "Greetings, young lord." The 3 of them bowed. Qin Feiyang looked at the 3 of them and then at Lei Bing and Wang Qi. He smiled and said, "If you want to cultivate in the Black Tortoise Realm, you can tell me directly. You don't have to be so careful." The 2 of them looked at each other with joy in their hearts. They bowed and said, "Thank you, young lord." Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "You came at the right time. I want to ask you about 2 people." "Who?" The 3 of them were suspicious. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the 2 young men in luxurious clothes appeared. The 3 of them looked at the 2 young men in luxurious clothes with a trace of suspicion in their eyes. "You haven't seen them before?" Qin Feiyang asked. The 3 of them shook their heads. Qin Feiyang said, "I suspect that they are from the Dragon Slayer Palace." "The Dragon Slayer Palace?" The 3 of them were stunned. "These 2 people provoked me time and time again in the treasure pavilion. They even know who I am, so I have to get to the bottom of this." Qin Feiyang said, "They know your identity. Then this matter really can't be taken lightly. But, young lord, if they are really from the Dragon Slayer Palace, it's useless to ask us. Because you know that there are many people in the Dragon Slayer Palace that we don't know. We have to ask the Divine General about this. The three of them said in a low voice. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, "Send him a message. I'll ask him." "Okay." Jiang Dafei nodded and took out the image crystal. Buzz. Soon, a masked man in black armor appeared. When the divine general saw Qin Feiyang beside him, he immediately glared at the three of them and said with a smile, "Young lord, congratulations! Why are you glaring at them? Are you unhappy to see me?" Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "It's nothing, it's nothing." The divine general waved his hand. "Let me ask you, who are they?" Qin Feiyang pointed to the two young men next to him and asked. The divine general looked at the two of them, and his pupils suddenly shrank. "Young lord, why are you asking about them? Judging from your reaction, they are really from the Dragon Slayer Palace." Qin Feiyang said. "Yes, but I don't understand. How do you know them?" The divine general was doubtful. Qin Feiyang said, "They came to provoke me. How can I not know them?" "Provoke you? When did this happen?" The divine general was surprised. Qin Feiyang said, "It's at the previous treasure pavilion. There must be a misunderstanding." The divine general hurriedly said. Although Qin Feiyang's tone was calm, one could see a trace of killing intent in his eyes. "Misunderstanding? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child?" Qin Feiyang sneered and said, "Tell me, who are they?" The divine general hesitated. "Speak," Qin Feiyang shouted. Even though they were separated by a great distance and were using an image crystal to communicate, the divine general still felt an enormous pressure from Qin Feiyang's body. The divine general sighed deeply and said, "To be honest, they are your competitors." "Someone competing with me?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Jiang Dafei and the other two were also very surprised. After thinking carefully, they said in surprise, "Sir Divine General, could it be the other?" The divine general nodded and said, "Yes, they are two of the other 3 young lords." Jiang Dafei smiled bitterly and shook his head. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Young Hall Master, it is indeed as you expected. They are already envious of the plundering of the northern city, Lord's manors, and obtaining the dragon race's 10 heaven-defying divine artifacts." Qin Feiyang's eyes were extremely terrifying at this moment. They were like blades. "Young lord, since they crossed the line and came to provoke us, we won't be polite." Lei Bing snorted. "Cross the line." Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and looked at Lei Bing suspiciously. What did he mean? Chapter 2533. Let me answer your question. The Immortal General said. Qin Feiyang looked up at the Immortal General. When this task was first issued, the 4 great emperors set the rules. The 4 young lords are each in charge of a place. No matter what happens, you can't cross the line and interfere with the affairs of the other 3 places. And now, these 2 young lords have broken this rule. The Immortal General sighed. "I see." Qin Feiyang nodded and said jokingly, "So, even if I kill them now, the higher-ups of the dragon-slaying palace can't say anything?" "Young lord, they might just be impulsive. You can't really kill them," the Immortal General said hurriedly. Qin Feiyang said, "According to what you said, I should just stand here and take the beating." "That's not what I meant. They're only doing this once. We're all members of the dragon-slaying palace. Why do they have to make it seem like they're mortal enemies?" The Immortal General said, "That's easy for you to say. When they hid in the crowd and fanned the flames and tried to kill me, why didn't they show mercy?" Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. Yes. They're in the wrong, but can't you be magnanimous and forgive them this time?" The Immortal General was helpless. "They have to pay the price for doing wrong. That's my principle." Qin Feiyang said lightly, "I know. Then bear with it for a while. I'll report to Emperor Qin and see what he thinks." The Immortal General said. "Suit yourself." Qin Feiyang shrugged and said, "Tell me first, Which place are they in charge of? This, I'd better report to Emperor Qin first. After the immortal general said that, he turned off the image crystal. What a joke! How could he tell Qin Feiyong about this? Qin Feiyong was a vengeful person. Once he knew, he would immediately send people to kill these two people. This guy only knows how to play dumb. Qin Feiyong was speechless. He looked at Jiang Dafei and the other two and asked, "Do you know?" "We definitely don't know." The three of them smiled bitterly. Qin Feiyong pondered for a moment. Looking at the three people, he said, "Wait, only two have appeared this time. Where's the other one? Maybe he doesn't want to be your enemy. It's also possible that he works for Sunlight Emperor. Emperor Yang and Emperor Qin are as close as brothers. I don't think they would help the other two to deal with you." Jiang Dafei and the other two guessed. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, "So I still have allies?" "Allies?" The three of them exchanged glances. Jiang Dafei said, "It's too early to say that. There are no eternal enemies or friends in this world. There are only eternal interests. So even if you are facing Sunlight Emperor's people, you can't take them lightly." Lei Bing and Wang Qi also nodded. Qin Feiyong looked at the three of them and nodded in appreciation. Good awareness. The three of them rubbed their heads and felt a little embarrassed. "Well, you don't have to worry about this. I will deal with it. Go and cultivate in seclusion." Qin Feiyong waved his hand and sent the three of them to the Black Tortoise realm. Then, Qin Feiyong lowered his head and pondered. Time passed by breath. Suddenly, Qin Feiyong looked down at the five-clawed golden dragon and said, "Little Gold, go to the west, south, and east to investigate them. Be careful to hide your identity." "I promise to complete the task." The five-clawed golden dragon rose into the air and looked at Qin Feiyong. Then he flew away without looking back. Watching the five-clawed golden dragon leave, Qin Feiyong sneered. So what if they were from the Dragon Slayer Palace? As long as they dared to provoke him, he would not let them go. Then, Qin Feiyong called Madman out and returned to the Dragon God Palace. "Brother Li, congratulations, congratulations. I hope Brother Li will take care of me in the future." When Qin Feiyong and Madman appeared in the valley, a large group of people immediately surrounded them with flattery on their faces. Obviously, they had all received the news and were envious in their hearts. He was actually valued by the Grand Palace Master and accepted as a disciple. This person was too lucky, but in this regard, Qin Feiyong only smiled faintly. Madman completely ignored those people and directly entered the cave. "Li Bu'er!" Suddenly, a shout rang out. The people surrounding the valley immediately looked up and saw a law enforcer descending from the sky. "Lin Hua!" "What's the matter?" Qin Feiyong stood at the entrance of the cave and looked at Lin Hua and asked. Lin Hua also changed his previous attitude, and his face was full of respect. "Under the orders of the Grand Palace Master, you and Madman are invited to the 10th island." Lin Hua landed in front of the cave and said with a flattering smile, "What? He actually went directly to the 10th island. Oh my God, this is really a step to the sky. It is said that the monsters of the Dragon God Palace are basically all on the 10th island." The people gathered above were full of envy. However, Qin Feiyong said with a calm face, not interested, "Don't disturb us." Madman also said to Lin Hua. Then the two entered the cave without looking back and set up a divine force boundary. Lin Hua was dumbfounded. The group of people above was also extremely shocked. The 10th island was a place that the disciples of the Dragon God Palace dreamed of going to, because entering the 10th island was a symbol of status and identity. But they didn't expect these two to directly refuse. They were truly two different species. They are indeed different from the rest. Lin Hua came back to his senses and shook his head with a wry smile. He opened the altar and went back to report. The others also left one after another. Qin Feiyong and Madman also entered the ancient castle. madman was cultivating in seclusion. Qin Feiyang was focused on studying the concealment art and rising dragon art. A day outside was 100 years in the ancient castle. After painstakingly studying, Qin Feiyang finally found the direction to improve these two divine techniques. The next morning, a white-clothed woman came to the Dragon God Palace. The woman was about 20 years old. Her hair was like a waterfall. Her white dress fluttered, and her skin shone with a hazy light like a fairy. The woman entered the Dragon God Palace and went directly to the first island. Who is she? So beautiful. But how come I don't remember such a beautiful woman on the first island? The woman's clothes fluttered like a snow-white butterfly. Any man who saw her would have a trace of amazement in their eyes. Where is she going? Wait. She seems to be going to the valley where Li Bu'er is. No way. Is she going to find Li Bu'er? This bastard, what kind of dog shit luck does he have? Everyone was indignant. First, he was accepted as a disciple by the Grand Hall Master, and now a peerless woman came to find him. Why did all these good things happen to him? The white-clothed woman stopped in the sky above the valley and glanced at it. Her gaze finally fell on the cave, and a smile appeared on her crystal clear face. Li Bu'er. She spoke softly, and her voice was as pleasant as the sound of nature. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang was focused on seclusion, and he was afraid of being disturbed, so he deliberately sealed off his 5 senses. At this moment, he had just reached a critical moment. Therefore, he didn't hear the voice of the white-clothed woman at all. The white-clothed woman waited for a while and was slightly stunned. Was he not in the cave? Li Bu'er, why are you pretending? We all know you are in the cave. Someone is looking for you. Come out quickly. A few idlers who couldn't stand it any longer stared at the cave and shouted. However, the white-clothed woman didn't appreciate it, and those who opposed were a little disgusted, but they didn't say anything. Miss, this Li Bu'er is too rude. Why don't you come to our cave first? But those people didn't realize it at all, and their faces were full of flattery. The white-clothed woman turned a deaf ear and looked at the cave quietly. Time passed quietly. Bang! In the cultivation room, Qin Feiyang's aura suddenly soared. He reached the great accomplishment paragon in an instant, but it wasn't over yet. His aura was still soaring. Bang! The next moment, it soared to the perfected paragon. Haha! Success! I finally succeeded. Qin Feiyang also suddenly opened his eyes and couldn't help laughing. What's the matter? Fire Lotus heard the noise and ran in, looking at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Girl, great news! Qin Feiyang stepped forward and grabbed Fire Lotus's shoulder, wild with joy. What great news! Fire Lotus was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said, the rising dragon technique and the concealment technique have already raised my level. Fire Lotus was stunned, looking at Qin Feiyang, and said, Is your current cultivation level related to the rising dragon technique? That's right. The rising dragon technique can now increase my cultivation level by 2 small realms. And the concealment technique has also increased from once a day to twice a day. Qin Feiyang laughed. Although it didn't seem to be much of an increase, one had to know that at Qin Feiyang's cultivation level, an additional small realm of cultivation was equivalent to an additional layer of protection. There was also the concealment technique. In the past, it could only be activated once a day, but now it could be activated twice. This was a qualitative leap. I see. Fire Lotus nodded in realization and said with a smile, No wonder you're so happy. However, you're hurting me. Only then did Qin Feiyang notice that he had lost his composure. He hurriedly let go of Fire Lotus and smiled awkwardly. Sorry. Fire Lotus rubbed her shoulders and said with a smile, Also, I just heard a familiar voice outside. What familiar voice? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Fire Lotus said, "It seems to be the woman you helped in the treasure pavilion. It can't be? Why is she in the Dragon God Palace?" Qin Feiyong was stunned. How would I know? Fire Lotus was speechless. All right, I'll go out and take a look. Qin Feiyong deactivated the rising dragon technique, and his cultivation returned to the level of a divine lord. He appeared in the cave abode and walked to the entrance. It's really him? When he saw the woman in white, Qin Feiyong's expression immediately fell into shock. The woman in white was like an orchid in an empty valley. She stood quietly in the sky above the valley, exuding a tranquil aura. "Don't you recognize me?" The woman in white also saw Qin Feiyong. She landed in Qin Feiyong's valley and stood opposite Qin Feiyong with a smile. You're a little different from when you were in the treasure pavilion, so I didn't dare to recognize you," Qin Feiyong said. The difference was indeed quite big. When they were in the treasure pavilion, the woman's clothes were a little tattered and there was dirt on her body. Most importantly, she looked extremely haggard. But now, she was radiant and peerless. Difference. The woman in white was stunned. She looked at herself and shook her head with a smile. "I've embarrassed myself." "No." Qin Feiyong waved his hand. Chapter 2534. The woman in white smiled sweetly and asked, "Aren't you going to invite me in?" Qin Feiyong shook his head. "My cave abode will probably be despised by you." "Is that so? Then I'm really curious." The woman in white said. Qin Feiyong smiled helplessly. With a wave of his hand, the barrier dissipated and he retreated to the side, saying, "Please come in." The woman in white walked slowly into the cave abode. She's in. This bastard, he really makes people jealous." The few people standing not far away looked at this scene with displeasure in their eyes. Inside the cave abode, looking at the simple cave abode, the woman in white was stunned. This was the most casual cave abode she had ever seen. There was nothing. How could this be called a cave abode? It was simply a cave. "I didn't lie to you, did I?" Qin Feiyong laughed dryly. "You're really a casual person." The woman in white shook her head. "I think it's quite good." Qin Feiyong smiled and asked suspiciously, "Why are you in the Dragon God Palace? Are you also a disciple of the Dragon God Palace?" "I'm not." The woman in white shook her head. "No. Then how did you enter the Dragon God Palace?" Qin Feiyong was stunned. "It's a secret." The woman in white smiled mysteriously and said, "Actually, I came to find you this time to thank you in person." "Thank you?" Qin Feiyong was slightly stunned and shook his head. "It's fine, it's just a small matter. To you it may be a small matter, but to me it's more important than my life. I'm also here to invite you to my house as a guest," the woman in white said. Qin Feiyong hurriedly said, "There's no need for that. My great-grandfather really wants to meet you. He told me to invite you over. For the sake of the old man, please go." The woman in white's face was full of pleading. Qin Feiyong hesitated. The woman in white smiled and said, "Don't worry, we won't eat you. Moreover, this might be an unexpected surprise for you." "Surprise?" Qin Feiyong shook his head with a wry smile. He could only hope that it was not a scare. "How is it? If you don't agree, then I won't leave." The woman in white smiled slyly. "All right." Qin Feiyong nodded helplessly. The woman in white was overjoyed and urged, "Then let's go." "Are we going now?" Qin Feiyong looked at him in astonishment. "Yeah." The white-robed woman nodded. "But I have something on my hands right now," Qin Feiyong said awkwardly. "What is it?" The white-robed woman was doubtful. Qin Feiyong didn't answer. "How about this? You go back first and give me the coordinates. When I'm done, I'll go there directly." Actually, he was fine. However, he couldn't leave the Dragon God Palace with the white-clothed woman. because he had already cancelled the fate contract. If he left with the white-clothed woman, then this matter would be exposed. Therefore, he had to send the white-clothed woman away first. "You're not lying to me, are you?" The white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Facing such a beautiful woman like you, lying to you is a sin." The white-clothed woman couldn't help but laugh. "This person is quite humorous. How about this? I'll wait for you outside the Dragon God Palace. When you're done, come find me." After the white-clothed woman finished speaking, she didn't give Qin Feiyang a chance to speak and directly turned to leave. Troublesome. Qin Feiyang shook his head. He could only enter the ancient castle and call Madman out. But since this woman wasn't from the Dragon God Palace, how could she enter the Dragon God Palace? When Madman brought Qin Feiyang out of the Dragon God Palace, he found that the white-clothed woman was really waiting at the bottom of the stone stairs. Madman glanced at the stone stairs and saw that there was no one around, so he called Qin Feiyang out. "She's down there. I guess this time you accidentally saved a very powerful person." Madman said, Either this woman is related to the dragons, or she is related to Yizhong." Qin Feiyang nodded, because only with this explanation could the white-clothed woman enter the Dragon God Palace. "Then be careful. Don't let your luck turn into a calamity." Madman smiled mockingly. "You can really talk nonsense?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and sent Madman to the ancient castle before walking down the stone stairs. "So fast?" Seeing this, the white-clothed woman was surprised. "It's just a small matter." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "If I knew it would be so fast, I would have waited for you outside the cave," the white-clothed woman said. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Let's go." The white-clothed woman nodded, opened an altar, and jumped on it. Qin Feiyang also jumped on the altar. Soon, the two of them landed in the sky above a mountain range. Qin Feiyang looked down. As far as the eye could see, it was desolate and uninhabited. A trace of suspicion crept into his eyes. But at this moment, the white-clothed woman opened another altar. And Qin Feiyang was stunned. If one altar couldn't be reached, how far was this woman's home from the Dragon God Palace? Next, he was even more puzzled. The woman continued to open altars. After opening more than 30 altars, she descended above a mountain range before stopping. In the mountain, the vegetation was lush. A river meandered across the entire mountain range. The river water was extremely clear. "We're here." The white-clothed woman smiled. Qin Feiyang scanned the area below him. Soon he saw a simple and unadorned little courtyard at a certain point in the river. "Let's go." The white-clothed woman brought Qin Feiyang and flew towards the small courtyard. Not long after, the two of them landed in the courtyard. Qin Feiyang looked around the courtyard. He didn't expect the woman to live in such a simple place. The woman glanced around the courtyard. Seeing that there was no one in the courtyard, she looked at the river, and by the river, an old man in sackcloth was quietly sitting on a small bench fishing. On the left and right sides of the old man in sackcloth, there were two white-haired old men. "They're there." The white-clothed woman smiled. Qin Feiyang turned around and locked his eyes on the backs of the two white-haired old men. Why were these two backs so familiar? Qin Feiyang followed behind the white-clothed woman and walked along the path in front of the courtyard towards the river. The more he looked, the more familiar he felt the two backs were. "Wait." Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's footsteps froze. Two faces appeared in his mind. It's them. It can't be such a coincidence. Great-grandfather, grandfather, second-grandfather. Before he walked over, the white-clothed woman shouted with a smile. The old man in sackcloth immediately turned his head to look at the white-clothed woman, and then his eyes fell on Qin Feiyang. Was it this young man who helped him extend his life by 100,000 years? The white-clothed woman trotted over and said with a smile, Great-grandfather, I didn't disappoint you. I invited Li Buer here. Good, good, good. The old man in sackcloth nodded with a smile. Then he got up and looked at the two white-haired old men and scolded, Why are you still sitting there? Get up and welcome the little brother. The two white-haired old men looked at each other and couldn't help but smile bitterly. They got up and slowly turned around to look at Qin Feiyang. It's true? Qin Feiyang was extremely shocked. These two people turned out to be Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng. Grandfather? Second grandfather? So the white-clothed woman was Yi Zhong's granddaughter? How is it? Are you surprised? The white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang and asked. Surprised? Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. It was indeed a shock. Yi Zhong looked at Qin Feiyang and said, You just acknowledged me as your master yesterday. How come you can't recognize me today? Greetings, master. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly and cupped his hands in front of his chest. The old man in sackcloth glared at Yi Zhong and scolded. Don't put on airs. Hurry up and make tea. I want the best tea. Father, he is my disciple after all. You want me, his master, to make tea for his disciple? That's not right. Yi Zhong said unhappily. What's wrong? I knew it. He is my savior. Hurry up. The old man in sackcloth said angrily. Okay. Don't be angry. I'll go right away. Yi Zhong said hurriedly, and then walked to the small courtyard. When he passed by Qin Feiyang, he couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and chuckled. Master, it's been hard on you. Yi Zhong's body stiffened. He was obviously laughing at him. Brat, just you wait. Yi Zhong snorted coldly and walked to the courtyard without looking back. Little brother, thank you so much. If not for you, I would have been buried in half a year at most. I will always remember this great kindness in my heart. Please accept my bow. The old man in sackcloth walked to Qin Feiyang with the help of Yi Cheng and the white-clothed woman. Old man, you can't accept this, Qin Feiyang said hurriedly. However, the old man in sackcloth insisted on bowing to Qin Feiyang. Thank you. Yi Cheng also bowed to Qin Feiyang gratefully. Qin Feiyang looked at Yi Cheng and couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. I really didn't expect that the person I saved was your father. I also didn't expect you to have such an elixir, Yi Cheng said secretly. He also smiled bitterly in his heart. When he left, Qin Feiyang asked him what had happened. Maybe it would help him if he told him. But at that time, he didn't believe that Qin Feiyang could help him. Unexpectedly, Shui met Qin Feiyang by chance and got the life-saving elixir. These 2 days, he had been scolding himself in his heart. If he could have trusted Qin Feiyang back then, would he have wasted so much time? Even if Shui hadn't met Qin Feiyang by chance, his old father would have died. At that time, it would all be his responsibility, because he missed the opportunity to save his old father. When his old father passed away, it would be useless to know that Qin Feiyang had a life-saving elixir. To be more serious, he had almost killed his old father. The tea is ready. Yi Zhong's voice sounded in the courtyard. Little brother, let's go and have some tea. The old man in sackcloth looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. The four of them returned to the courtyard. The old man in sackcloth suddenly said, By the way, little brother, I forgot to ask you just now. Do you like tea or wine? I don't drink. However, this junior is quite fond of tea. Qin Feiyang smiled. Not bad, not bad. It's rare for young people nowadays to not drink. This wine, drinking a little is fine, but drinking too much is harmful to the body. It's not as comfortable as drinking tea. The old man in sackcloth smiled with relief. The more he looked at Qin Feiyang, the more he liked him. Chapter 2535. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. No wonder Yi Cheng liked tea so much. It turned out that he had a father who loved tea so much. Entering the courtyard, Qin Feiyang sat at the stone table under the warm hospitality of the old man in sackcloth. The tea on the table bubbled, and the fragrance of tea filled the air. The woman in white smelled the tea and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. This is the tea that second grandpa gave to great-grandpa. It's the best tea. Try it. The best tea? Qin Feiyang was stunned. However, Yi Cheng had an awkward expression on his face. What kind of tea was the best tea? It was not at the same level as the tea that Qin Feiyang drank. The old man in sackcloth looked at Yi Zhong, who was sitting at the side, and said, "What are you doing? Hurry up and pour us some tea." Cough, cough. Yi Zhong immediately choked and coughed violently. "You've brewed the tea, and you still want me to brew it? My father, can't you leave me some face? How can I face this disciple in the future?" The woman in white was very sensible. Seeing Yi Zhong's dissatisfaction, she stood up and picked up the teapot and smiled. "Let me do it." Her movements were very elegant and had the demeanor of a lady from a noble family. At this moment, Yi Zhongzai sighed in relief. Fortunately, there was a well-behaved granddaughter to help him out. The woman in white poured tea for them one by one and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. "Try it." Qin Feiyang picked up the teacup and sniffed it. "Isn't this the tea that Yi Cheng gave me last time in the duty hall?" And from the beginning to the end, Yi Cheng had an awkward look on his face, because he had tasted Qin Feiyang's tea in the Black Tortoise world. That was the real best tea. "How is it?" The old man in sackcloth looked at Qin Feiyang expectantly. Qin Feiyang glanced at Yi Cheng next to him, tasted it slightly, and nodded with a smile. "It's indeed good tea." Cough, cough. Yi Cheng coughed dryly, and his expression became even more awkward. "I don't have many hobbies. The only thing I like to do is to drink tea. Thus, I would often have the two of them gather some good tea for me. If you like it, I can give you some as a gift for our first meeting." The linen-clothed old man smiled. "You're still giving me gifts?" Yi Cheng really couldn't sit still, and hurriedly said, "Lord Father, if you want to drink tea, then drink tea. Why are you saying so much?" What a joke! Other people's tea was 1,000 times better than this. No, 10,000 times better. How could they like this kind of tea? He even gave her a greeting gift. How embarrassing! The old man in sackcloth said angrily, "Little brother, you've saved my old life, and you're not even willing to give me some tea leaves." "My old father, that's not what I meant, I'll be frank with you. Li Bu-er was being polite to you." Yi Cheng said bitterly. "What do you mean?" The linen-clothed old man was suspicious. Yi Zhong and the white-clothed woman also looked at Yi Cheng in confusion. Qin Feiyang said, "Deputy Palace Master, let's not talk about this anymore in case it's awkward. I'm afraid that if I don't talk about it, it'll get even more awkward later." Yi Cheng shook his head and looked at the linen-clothed old man. "Li Bu-er has a type of tea that's countless times better than ours." The linen-clothed old man was slightly stunned and hurriedly looked at Qin Feiyang, asking, "Little brother, is that true?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Old man, I do prefer my own tea, but that's just my personal preference. Please don't misunderstand." "Misunderstand what?" "Good is good. In the way of tea, there's no such thing as awkwardness. Since little brother has such good tea, can I have a taste?" The linen-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang eagerly. "Lord Father, you," Yi Cheng was a little frustrated. "Why can't I change this bad habit of mine? As soon as I hear that there's good tea, I'll ask for it regardless of whether I know it or not. That's way too rude." Yi Zhong had a helpless look on his face. Obviously, this old father of his was also quite a headache. However, the white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang curiously. This, Qin Feiyang wanted to refuse, fearing that the situation would be awkward, but looking at the linen-clothed old man's eyes, he couldn't refuse. Okay. Qin Feiyang took out a sealed tea jar, which was made by fire lotus and had not been opened yet. He smiled and said, "Old man, I'll give this to you. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not, of course not." The linen-clothed old man waved his hand and looked at Yi Zhong. "Hurry up! Change the tea." Yi Zhong's face stiffened and he glanced at the white-clothed woman. "Why are you looking at Shua?" Shua and Brotherly are both young people. They have common topics to talk about when they're together. You're already so old. Why are you joining in the fun? Hurry up!" The linen-clothed old man scolded angrily. Yi Zhong's forehead immediately creased with black lines. Qin Feiyang looked at Yi Zhong from the side and couldn't help but want to laugh. The dignified Grand Hall Master of the Dragon God Palace, who was not weaker than the ancestors and the various ancestral dragons, was actually being scolded to the point of bleeding. If this were to spread out, it would definitely cause an unprecedented sensation. The white-clothed woman and Yi Cheng's faces were also flushed red. What about the Grand Hall Master? So what if he was a supreme expert? In front of his great-grandfather, in front of his old father, wasn't he still able to scold him whenever he wanted? He didn't even dare to retort. Yi Zhong glanced at Qin Feiyang, then looked at Yi Cheng and said, "Yi Cheng." Yi Cheng immediately turned his head to look elsewhere, as if he didn't hear anything. "Do you want me to invite you with a stick?" The linen-clothed old man shouted. "Don't be angry, I'll change it, I'll change it." Yi Zhong immediately stood up and glared fiercely at Yi Cheng. Then he picked up the teapot and angrily walked toward the wooden house. What was going on? In any case, he was still a reputable person. How could he be ordered around like this? What kind of nonsense was that? Wait a minute. It seemed that from the beginning until now, his old father had been calling Li Bu her little brother all the time. And just now, he even called him Brotherly? Brother? Master and disciple? What the hell was this? If that was the case, didn't he have to call this kid uncle? It was a mess. Everything was a mess. Looking at the embarrassed Yi Zhong, the white-clothed woman said in a low voice, "Great-grandfather, leave some face for grandfather! No matter how good he is still my son. No matter how bad I am still his father. Why should I leave him face? Let's talk about it later. There are no outsiders here. Why should I leave him face?" The linen-clothed old man snorted coldly. "No outsiders?" The white-clothed woman was stunned and glanced at Qin Feiyang. Wasn't this an outsider? However, it seemed that in the eyes of her great-grandfather, this person was already family. The white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang and said apologetically, "Don't take offense. Our family is like this. It's okay. I quite like this atmosphere. It's relaxed. There's no pressure." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. The linen-clothed old man said, "Brotherly, if you like it, you can come here often to play." "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded. Although Yi Zhong was in a sorry state, this old man's personality was very straightforward. He spoke whatever was on his mind and did not hide anything. He was not like those hypocrites who said one thing on the surface and another behind their backs. The white-clothed woman stood up and stretched out her hand in front of Qin Feiyang. She smiled and said, "Let me formally introduce myself. I am Yi Shue, Yi Zhong's granddaughter. Li Bu a nobody." Qin Feiyang also stood up and smiled. He gently shook Yi Shue's hand and then retracted it. "If you're a nobody, then what am I? Now in the north, who doesn't know your name, Li Bu? Yi Shue shook her head and returned to the stone bench. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "Reputation is not necessarily a good thing." The linen-clothed old man sized up Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "Brotherly, may I take the liberty to ask something?" "Go ahead." Qin Feiyang said with a smile, Where do you live? Who is in your family? The linen-clothed old man said. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Was he checking the entrance of the household? Yi Cheng was also shocked and hurriedly said, Father, why are you asking this? He knew Qin Feiyang's identity, and Qin Feiyang's identity was a minefield that could not be touched. Yes, great-grandfather. That's too presumptuous. Yi Shui was also unhappy. That's why I'm taking the liberty to ask. The linen-clothed old man glanced at the two of them and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. Brotherly, you don't mind, right? If you do, just pretend that I didn't ask. It's okay. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said with a smile, Actually, I don't know where I'm from either. What do you mean? The linen-clothed old man was suspicious. Great-grandfather, if he said that, then there must be a painful past. Aren't you deliberately making him feel uncomfortable by getting to the root of the matter? Yi Shui said unhappily. The linen-clothed old man was stunned and nodded. Yes, brotherly, I'm really sorry. It's okay. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. At this moment, Yi Zhong walked out with a teapot in his hand and looked very calm. The linen-clothed old man immediately stared at the teapot and looked forward to it. Yi Zhong opened the teapot. A burst of tea fragrance immediately overflowed. Yi Zhong was slightly stunned. He took out a tea leaf, put it at the tip of his nose, and sniffed it. Then he put it in his mouth, and a look of shock flashed across his old eyes. What kind of tea leaf was this? The taste was so pure. When he came back to his senses, he quickly grabbed some tea leaves and put them into the teapot, then poured some water. The tea fragrance became stronger. The entire courtyard was filled with the tea fragrance. The linen-clothed old man's eyes were shining. The tea fragrance alone was incomparable to the previous tea. Great-grandfather, try it. Yi Shui picked up the teapot and poured a small cup for the linen-clothed old man. Generally speaking, the tea leaves had to be filtered. That was to say, the first tea had to be poured away. This was because many tea leaves had a bitter taste when they were first served. On the other hand, this was also to wash away the stains on the tea leaves. But the tea leaves cultivated by the fire lotus were different. Not only was the taste of the first tea not bitter, but it was also more pure. As for the stains on the tea leaves, it was even more impossible. Because this was drunk by Qin Feiyang, the fire lotus was very clean when it was made. The linen-clothed old man picked up the teacup, smelled it first, then put it to his mouth and gently took a sip. At that moment, his old eyes were shining. Was this tea? No. This was Immortal Dew, the immortal of tea. He had never drunk such good tea in his life. Yi Zhong looked at his old father and also picked up the teacup and tasted it. His eyes were full of envy. This was indeed not something their tea leaves could compare to. The linen-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Brotherly, may I ask, where did you get these tea leaves? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, They were personally cultivated by my younger sister. Amazing. Brother, Li is really a blessed person to have such a sister who is so good at cultivating tea trees. I'm really envious. The linen-clothed old man said, Senior, you flatter me. Qin Feiyang shook his head. The linen-clothed old man looked at Yi Zhong and said, In the future, when you send me tea, you must also send such tea leaves. Father, aren't you making things difficult for us? The brothers smiled bitterly. I don't care. If it can't compare to this tea, don't send it to me. The linen-clothed old man said with a cold face. Okay. The two of them nodded helplessly. The linen-clothed old man said, Then you two brothers hurry up and cook. We cook? The two of them widened their eyes and jumped up. What? Do you want me to cook it myself? The linen-clothed old man's face was stern. When he saw the two of them looking at Yi Shui, he said angrily, Don't look at Shui, go by yourself. Sigh. The brothers got up, shook their heads, sighed, and walked towards the wooden building. Since when did people of their statuses cook for themselves? Wasn't this making things difficult for them? This old man really knew how to torture people. Chapter 25:36. Qin Feiyang looked at their backs and couldn't help but laugh. This was the first time he saw Yi Zhong being so wasteful. It also proved one thing. No matter how strong one was, there would still be people they were afraid of. Grandpa. Suddenly, Yi Shui stood up and called out to Yi Zhong. What? Yi Zhong turned around and looked at her unhappily. He seemed to be blaming Yi Shui for not helping him out. Yi Shui took out a milky white token from her arms and handed it to Yi Zhong. Qin Feiyang's pupils constricted. He had seen this token before. Yi Cheng also had one. According to Yi Cheng, there were a total of 3 tokens. They were in the hands of the brothers and the beast emperor in the internal sea. It turned out that Yi Shui had taken this token to enter the dragon god hall. Here you go. Be careful when cooking. Don't burn the house. Yi Shui held back her laughter and said, Wretched girl. Yi Zhong glared at Yi Shui, kept the token, and entered the wooden building. After a while, smoke rose from the kitchen. Brotherly, come, have some tea. The old man in linen warmly greeted Qin Feiyang. Old senior, you should change the way you address him. You can't mess up the seniority. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. That's right. If you call him brother, then how should I address him in the future? Yi Shui was helpless. The more she called him, the smoother it got. That's true. The old man in linen rubbed Yi Shui's head and looked at Qin Feiyang. Then tell me, how should I address you in the future? Qin Feiyang pondered. To be honest, this form of address was really troublesome, because the seniority difference was too big. Yi Shui thought for a while and smiled. Isn't his name Li Bu'er? Why don't you call him Shao Li Shao? That's impolite. The old man in linen shook his head. Is there? No. Yi Shui was doubtful. The old man shook his head and smiled. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, How about this? This old man will call you Little Friendly from now on. Sure. Qin Feiyang nodded. The old man in sackcloth said, Little Friendly, may I ask if your sister is with you? You. Qin Feiyang looked at him in confusion. The linen-clothed old man smiled and said, This old man would like to ask her how these tea leaves are cultivated. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded in understanding and said apologetically, I'm sorry, my little sister is not with me right now. A trace of disappointment appeared in the old man's eyes as he said, If you have the chance in the future, please let this old man meet her. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded. He didn't want Fire Lotus to appear in public. After all, Yi Zhong was the person Long Zuin trusted the most. The identity of the Fire Lotus was also a taboo. What if Yi Zhong noticed something? So he couldn't take the risk. About an hour passed. Yi Zhong and his brother finally came out with 4 side dishes in their hands. However, the 2 of them looked funny. Both of them were covered in dust. I asked you to cook a meal, but you actually turned out like this. How embarrassing. The linen-clothed old man didn't hide it and stared at them. The 2 of them felt extremely wronged. For them, being able to cook this meal was already very difficult. Even if it wasn't an exaggeration, they should at least be encouraged. They didn't expect to be ruthlessly criticized. It seemed that this old man was determined to embarrass them today. Let's eat, let's eat. Yi Cheng coughed dryly and said with a smile, In all my life, I've never seen them cook with their own hands. The taste may not be good. Please bear with it. Yi Shui glanced at the side dishes on the table and transmitted her voice to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. To be honest, These few dishes made people lose their appetite. However, it was rare for the two of them to cook like this for the first time. Qin Feiyang picked up his chopsticks and picked up a piece of green vegetable. When he was about to try it, he found that Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng were staring at him. They looked quite nervous. "Why are you looking at him?" Yi Shue looked at the two of them suspiciously and also picked up a piece of green vegetable and put it in her mouth. Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng quickly looked at Yi Shue. Yi Shue swallowed it, took out a snow-white handkerchief, wiped the oil stains at the corner of her mouth, and nodded. "The taste is okay." "Really?" Yi Zhong and his brother were quite excited when they heard this. "Really?" Yi Shue answered very seriously. Yi Zhong and his brother looked at Qin Feiyang again. Qin Feiyang looked at the two brothers and then at Yi Shue suspiciously. Why did this woman's expression look strange? He braced himself and put the green vegetable in his mouth. His body immediately froze. This was okay. "How is it?" Yi Zhong and his brother looked at Qin Feiyang nervously. Qin Feiyang swallowed hard and nodded. "For someone who is cooking for the first time, this taste is okay. Great-grandpa, grandpa, second grandpa, you should try it too." Yi Shue smiled. The old man in linen looked at Yi Shue and Qin Feiyang and said, "You're not lying to me, are you?" Yi Shue said, "How would we dare to lie to you? It's really okay." Qin Feiyang felt a little guilty. The old man in linen picked up a piece of green vegetable and put it in his mouth. His expression changed immediately, and it was very interesting. "Father, how is it?" Yi Zhong and his brother looked at him and asked. The old man in linen secretly glared at Yi Zhong and nodded at Yi Shue, and said with a smile, "It's very good." Yi Zhong and his brother looked at each other and smiled. They did not expect to be recognized by everyone on their first time cooking. It seemed that they were also talented. The two of them also grabbed their chopsticks, picked up a piece of green vegetable, and put it in their mouths. Immediately, the smile on their faces froze. Following that, the two of them turned around and vomited. "Why is it so salty? Is this something that humans eat?" The old man in linen laughed out loud. Yi Shue and Qin Feiyang could not help but snicker. The brothers smiled bitterly, looked at the old man in linen, and said helplessly, "Father, is there anyone like you?" Following that, Yi Zhong glared at Qin Feiyang and Yi Shue again. "One is the Grand Hall Master of the Dragon God Palace, and the other is the Vice Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Palace. What kind of bullshit are they making? Why don't you guys taste it before cooking?" The old man in linen held his chopsticks and flipped through a few dishes with a look of disdain. The two brothers lowered their heads, their faces filled with embarrassment. "Forget it, I'll cook it myself. You can't count on me. Little girl Shue, clean up." The old man in linen shook his head, stood up, and quickly walked into the wooden building. Yi Shue shook her head and smiled, cleaned up the dishes on the table, and also went to help. Qin Feiyang looked at the embarrassed Yi Zhong, and Yi Shue coughed dryly and said, "About that, I'll go help as well. Sit down," Yi Zhong said with a dark face. Qin Feiyang's expression froze, and when he returned to the stone bench, his entire body felt uncomfortable. Yi Zhong said, "You've seen enough jokes. How would this disciple dare to laugh at you, master?" Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly. "Come on, let me tell you, you are not allowed to mention what you saw today to anyone." Yi Zhong said angrily. Qin Feiyang slyly said, "This doesn't seem to be something shameful, right?" "What did you say?" Yi Zhong immediately glared at Qin Feiyang fiercely. Good. I won't say anything." Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hand. Yi Zhong shook his head helplessly, turned to look Yi Cheng, and sighed. "I think father deliberately embarrassed us today." "I think so too." Yi Cheng smiled bitterly. Yi Zhong took a deep breath, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Li Bu, while the old master's not here, I'd like to ask you a few questions seriously. Yi Cheng, who was next to him, was stunned. He looked at Yi Zhong, and then at Qin Feiyang, looking a little nervous. Go ahead. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered slightly, and he looked at Yi Zhong. Yi Zhong said, Where are you from? Qin Feiyang sighed secretly. Sure enough, he could not avoid the interrogation. When he was in the treasure school yesterday, he had already expected that Yi Zhong would come to ask about his background sooner or later, because Yi Zhong would not let a person of unknown origin become his disciple. Dragons would not allow it either. I want to hear the truth. Yi Zhong stared at Qin Feiyang. Yi Cheng was also extremely uneasy. He did not know if Qin Feiyang had made preparations in advance. However, Qin Feiyang did not change his expression, shook his head and said, I don't want to talk about these things. You have to answer me, because this is Long Zun's order. If you don't say it, I'm afraid even I can't help you. Yi Zhong said. What? Long Zun? Qin Feiyang was shocked. That's right. After leaving the treasure school yesterday, I went to see Long Zun and told him about accepting you as his disciple. Long Zun did not object at that time. He only said one sentence, that we must find out your origin. Yi Zhong said. Qin Feiyang asked, Then, according to what you said, if there is no problem with my origin, Long Zun will still think highly of me. You are very smart. That's right. If there is no problem with your identity, dragons will focus on training you. Yi Zhong said. Qin Feiyang pondered. In that case, it was still an opportunity to enter the dragon's inner circle? To be honest, after understanding the power of dragons, he did not have much confidence in destroying the dragons. But if he could enter the dragon's inner circle and get close to Long Zun, it might be easier. As my disciple, you already have a high status and power. But in the end, power and status are just worldly possessions. Your own strength is the foundation. If there is no problem with your identity, I can use my connections to let you enter the Divine Dragon Island. Yi Zhong said. Enter the Divine Dragon Island? Qin Feiyang was stunned. You probably don't know yet, but the Divine Dragon Island has a time array. 30 years in a day. Yi Zhong said. 30 years in a day. Qin Feiyang was shocked. Yi Zhong continued. And this time array covers the entire Divine Dragon Island. So it's like that. No wonder other than dragons, no one is allowed to step into the Divine Dragon Island. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. However, 30 years in a day was very awesome. Even the time array of the Dragon Slayer Palace could not compare. One had to know. The Dragon Slayer Palace had a time array of 50 years in a day, not to mention compared to the Black Tortoise World and the ancient castle. For Qin Feiyang, this time array was not tempting at all. Of course, this was something that he definitely could not show. Chapter 25:37. Yi Cheng, who was next to him, was also a little disdainful, because he knew how terrifying the time law of the castle and the Black Tortoise realm were. A large part of the reason why he chose to follow Qin Feiyang was because of this, but Yi Zhong didn't know. From his point of view, allowing Qin Feiyang to enter the Divine Dragon Island was an enormous favor. Yi Zhong said, Tell me, don't lie to this old man. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and shook his head. Actually, I don't know my background, let alone who my parents are. Yi Zhong was stunned. Yi Cheng heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at Qin Feiyang's relaxed expression, he should be prepared. I won't hide it from you. I was raised by an old man. Qin Feiyang said. Old man? Yi Zhong was suspicious. I don't know his name. It is said that he picked me up in the wilderness. When he picked me up, I was still a baby. The old man didn't know who my parents were, so he let me take his surname Li. He named me Li Bu for a reason. He wanted me to be a man of my word, no matter what happened or who I met when I grew up. to be an honest and decisive person. Qin Feiyang said, "What's the old man's name? Where is he now?" Yi Zhong asked. "His name is Li Xiaoyao. I've always called him Uncle Li. As for where Uncle Li is now, I really don't know. That old man is a wild crane with no fixed abode. Ever since I came out to explore the world, he has been traveling the world. Until now, he hasn't contacted me." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Wild crane." Yi Zhong frowned and asked, "Can you contact him?" "I can't. When we separated, he was afraid that I would rely on him too much, so he erased the contract in the image crystal." Qin Feiyang sighed. Li Xiaoyao. Yi Zhong frowned. He had been in the divine prefecture for countless years. Anyone with a little bit of fame basically knew a thing or two. However, he had never heard of the name Li Xiaoyao. Qin Feiyang said calmly he is indifferent to fame and fortune and likes to travel. "I don't think many people know his name." Yi Zhong pondered for a moment and asked, "What's the old man's cultivation?" "I'm not too sure about that. In short, in my eyes, that old man is unfathomable." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Yi Zhong was even more puzzled. "You saw Xiao Jin at the treasure pavilion yesterday, right?" "Xiao Jin is his mount," Qin Feiyang said. "What? The 5-clawed golden dragon is actually his mount?" Yi Zhong was shocked. "Of course. To him, Xiao Jin is more like his family," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Yi Zhong asked, "Then what about the old woman who helped you kill the island master when you entered the Dragon God Palace?" "This old woman was Fire Lotus in disguise." Qin Feiyang, of course, couldn't tell the truth. He said, "She's Uncle Li's servant, but to Uncle Li she's also family. They're all here to protect you?" Yi Zhong couldn't believe it to the extreme. A servant had a half-step invincible realm cultivation, and Amount was not only a 5-clawed golden dragon, but also a beginner invincible realm cultivation. Then how strong was this so-called Li Xiaoyao? "They're protecting me, but more importantly, they're taking care of me. Therefore, I am very grateful to Uncle Li. He was the one who raised me and taught me how to cultivate. In my eyes, he's my grandfather," Qin Feiyang said. Yi Zhong said with a smile, "To be able to cultivate a talent like you, he's definitely not an ordinary person. I really want to meet this old man." Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile, "There's still a long way to go. There's a chance." "One more question. Where's that young man? What's your relationship with him?" Yi Zhong said. "Young man?" Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and shook his head. "I really have nothing to do with him." "Impossible. If you have nothing to do with him, why would he take care of you like this?" Yi Zhong was suspicious. "There's really nothing to do with him. I met him when I entered the Dragon God Palace's examination. At that time, I was troubled by the emissary of the dragons. He couldn't stand it and helped me. Then he took me into the examination place. Our relationship is just like that. To be honest, I've been wondering why he helped me so much." "Do you have other intentions?" Qin Feiyang frowned. He didn't lie to Yi Zhong about the young man's attitude. It was the truth. The young man's performance again and again surprised him. What happened before the examination? This old man also asked the emissary of the dragons to investigate. It's indeed as you said. But this old man really doesn't understand. What's his intention for helping him? Are you sure you're telling the truth?" Yi Zhong frowned. "If you don't believe me, you can ask him yourself. I don't even know his name." Qin Feiyang was helpless. "All right then." Yi Zhong nodded. Qin Feiyang secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He finally fooled him. However, in order to completely dispel the doubts in Yi Zhong's heart, he still had to put on a show. In short, in this world, there must be a person like Li Xiaoyao, and Yi Zhong had to see him in person. Thinking of this, Qin Feiyang sent a sound transmission. Fire Lotus find Hoi and tell him to prepare. Okay, Fire Lotus secretly replied. Fire Lotus was in the castle and heard all the conversations between Qin Feiyang and Yi Zhong, so she knew what to do. Time to eat. The linen-clothed old man and Yi Shui walked out with 4 side dishes. He had to admit, the old man and Yi Shui Er's culinary skills were far from what the Yi Zhong brothers could compare to. The wild vegetables that they grew could be made into exquisite dishes. The taste was also top-notch. Although the dishes were simple, they ate happily, especially Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng. To be able to sit and eat with their old father, their hearts were filled with happiness. Yi Shui was the same. Grandfather and second grandfather were usually busy people, and it was rare for them to come home. All these years, it was usually her and her great-grandfather who accompanied each other. Therefore, for her, there was nothing more blissful than being together with her family. Looking at the family of 4, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face. Life was actually so simple. It was just that many people weren't easy to be satisfied and pursued too many things, so they neglected these things. After a busy life, looking back, it turned out that these were the things that were worth cherishing the most. Mother, father, grandfather, grandfather, great-grandfather, second grandfather, little cousin, Fatso, Xiaohong, are you guys doing well now? Figures constantly flashed in his mind. Qin Feiyang's heart missed them very much. After eating, Qin Feiyang accompanied the linen-clothed old man to the river, fishing, drinking tea, and chatting. The linen-clothed old man was very talkative. Usually he was the one talking, and Qin Feiyang listened. Time flew. Night fell. Qin Feiyang got up and said goodbye. The linen-clothed old man was still a little reluctant. After a day of interaction, whether it was Qin Feiyang's speech or character, he admired them very much. In the end, it was only under the advice of Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng that the linen-clothed old man let go and sent Qin Feiyang away. Let me tell you, in the future in the Dragon God Palace, you must take good care of him. The linen-clothed old man looked at the Yi Zhong brothers and said, I know. I've said it hundreds of times. Yi Zhong smiled helplessly, looked at Yi Shui, and said, Take good care of great-grandfather. Let's go back to the Dragon God Palace first. Leaving so soon? Yi Shui was stunned. There's no other way. Some time ago, Qin Feiyang caused such a big commotion. Long Zun has already given a death order to get rid of this person. I really didn't expect it. A junior of the future generation actually brought such a big threat to the dragons. Yi Zhong shook his head and sighed. Hearing this, Yi Cheng seemed to want to say something, but hesitated. Qin Feiyang, Yi Shui muttered, Wait, grandfather, second grandfather, I think I've seen him somewhere before. What? Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng looked at her in shock. Yi Shui lowered her head and thought for a moment. Her eyes trembled slightly as she said, It can't be such a coincidence. What's wrong? Yi Zhong and Yi Shui were even more surprised. I remember that 9 months ago, in order to find a way to extend great-grandfather's life, I accidentally entered a forest. In the forest, I met an unconscious man. He was covered in blood. At that time, I felt that he looked familiar, but because of great-grandfather, I didn't think too much about it. Now that I think about it, he seems to be Qin Feiyang. Yi Shui said. Yi Zhong hurriedly asked, Where is he? It's useless to tell you now. He must have already left. It's quite funny, I actually saved him. Yi Shui smiled bitterly. What? You saved him? Yi Zhong was stunned. Yes. At that time I saw that he was unconscious on the ground and there were many fierce beasts around him. So I set up a barrier to protect him. Furthermore, I also gave him a divine life pill, Yi Futin said. If I calculate the time carefully, he should have escaped from the internal sea and then fell unconscious. Yi Shui shook her head. You little girl. Yi Zhong looked at her speechlessly. She actually saved Qin Feiyang. If Long Zuin knew about this, he would definitely misunderstand that he was Qin Feiyang's accomplice. I see. Yi Qing finally understood in his heart. At first, he was still wondering why Qin Feiyang, who he had never met, would help Shui. It turned out that Shui had saved him before. It was just that even Shui herself didn't know that the person who helped her was Qin Feiyang. Yi Cheng, Shui, and father, this matter is only known to us. You can't tell anyone else. Yi Zhong took a deep breath and looked at the three of them. Why? Yi Shui was puzzled. Qin Feiyang is Long Zuin's greatest enemy. What will Long Zuin think if you save him? Although we all know that you did it unintentionally, Long Zuin won't think so. If this matter falls into Long Zuin's ears, I'm afraid not only you, but even grandfather, second grandfather, and your great-grandfather will be implicated. Yi Zhong said in a deep voice. So serious? Yi Shui was shocked. Yi Zhong sighed. I'm afraid that when that time comes it will be more serious than what I said. In short, this matter must be kept a secret. Yes, the three of them nodded. Chapter 2538. Then let's go back first. If there's anything, remember to send us a message immediately. Yi Zhong looked at the old man and Yi Shui and smiled. Okay. The grandfather and granddaughter nodded in response. Yi Zhong opened one of the altars and walked up. Shui, take good care of great-grandfather. Yi Cheng reminded. Got it. Yi Shui giggled. Yi Cheng rubbed Yi Shui's head dotingly and jumped up the altar as well. Soon, the two of them disappeared. Great-grandfather, let me accompany you for a while. Yi Shui retracted her gaze and looked at the old man with a smile. Okay, great-grandfather also wants to have a good chat with you. The old man in sackcloth smiled and pulled Yi Shui towards the river. Chat about what? Yi Shui was suspicious. The old man said, All these years, you've been accompanying an old man like me. Do you feel bored? Of course not. I quite like this kind of life. Unlike Grandpa and Second Grandpa, who are always scheming against each other outside. It's tiring. Yi Shui shook her head. This is survival. Wasn't it the same for great-grandfather when he was young? It's just that great-grandfather's talent isn't good enough. I don't have the achievements of your grandpa and second grandpa. The old man sighed. How can that be? If great-grandfather's talent isn't good enough, how can he have such a talented grandfather? Yi Shui smiled. In our Yi family, your grandfather is an exception, because in our Yi family there has never been such a talented person. For example, your second grandpa's talent is far inferior to your grandfather's. Although your grandfather is now working for the dragons, we can't have other thoughts. Because without your grandfather, we wouldn't have such a comfortable life. The old man said. Shui knows. Yi Shui nodded. Of course, we can't let your grandfather shoulder everything. Besides, your grandfather is already so old. Many people want to help, but they can't. You're the only descendant of our Yi family. From now on, the Yi family will rely on you, the old man said. How can that be? Grandfather is quite young. Yi Shui smiled. The old man smiled and said, If your grandfather hears this, he will definitely be very happy. However, you should also make preparations for your life. What should I prepare? Yi Shui was doubtful. Great-grandpa's lifespan has been extended to 100,000 years. In the future, you don't have to accompany this old man every day. Go to the Dragon God Palace tomorrow. Cultivate well. If you have the chance, it would be best to enter the Divine Dragon Island. I heard from your grandfather that the divine Dragon Island has a time array. You'll grow faster this way. The linen-clothed old man smiled. Yi Shui. I was slightly taken aback. She hurriedly asked, Great-grandfather, are you chasing me away? How could great-grandfather bear to chase you away? Great-grandfather wants to let go of your hand and let you go out and explore as much as you want. The old man in sackcloth said dotingly. I'm not going. Yi Shui shook her head. Why? The linen-clothed old man was suspicious. I want to accompany great-grandfather. 100,000 years isn't that long. Yi Shui said, You little girl. The linen-clothed old man shook his head and said with a smile, Then how about this? Great-grandfather promises you that you'll work hard in your cultivation in the future, as long as great-grandfather breaks through to the half-step imperishable realm. It's basically equivalent to having an eternal lifespan. Really? Yi Shui. I looked at the linen-clothed old man in surprise. Will great-grandfather lie to you? But it depends on whether great-grandfather has the ability. After all, this imperishable realm is the biggest hurdle for living beings in the world. The linen-clothed old man said, Shui, or believes that you can definitely do it. Yi Shui said. The linen-clothed old man asked, Then you've promised great-grandfather? How dare I not listen to great-grandfather's words? After a while, I'll accompany you again and report to the Dragon God Palace. Yi Shui smiled playfully. Okay. The linen-clothed old man nodded. The Dragon God Palace. On the stone stairs, Yi Zhong suddenly stopped, turned his head to look at Yi Qing behind him, and asked in confusion, You seem to have something to say along the way. Do you have something to say? Yi Qing's expression stiffened, and he said with a smile, You saw through it. We grew up together. How can I not see through it? Yi Zhong rolled his eyes at him and said, Just say what you want to say. Yi Qing pondered and didn't say anything. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, Big brother, have you ever thought about a question? You've worked for the dragons for so many years. Is it worth it? What did you say? Yi Zhong immediately shouted and hurriedly looked down the stone stairs. Seeing that there was no one, he let out a sigh of relief. Yi Qing lowered his head, not daring to look at Yi Zhong directly. Yi Zhong looked at Yi Qing and transmitted his voice. Why did you suddenly have such an idea? I don't know either. It's just a sudden impulse. I feel that these dragons are not as good as we think. Yi Qing shook his head. Hearing this, Yi Zhong was silent for a while and said to himself, You can't have such thoughts again, okay? It will kill our family. All right. Yi Qing nodded. Returning to the Dragon God Palace, Yi Zhong opened the altar. After watching Yi Zhong leave, Yi Qing sighed in his heart and also opened an altar, descending into the sky above the valley. Li Bu'er, Yi Qing said. Soon, Qin Feiyang walked out of the cave and smiled. So it's Deputy Palace Master. Please come in. Yi Qing walked into the cave. Qin Feiyang glanced at the valley outside and also returned to the cave. Qin Feiyang looked at Yi Qing and smiled. Since you two brothers have returned, has the 10th elder and the white-clothed woman already left the Dragon God Palace? They left yesterday, said Li Tianlan. I have to say, you're really amazing, making the 10th elder so miserable in the Dragon God Palace. Yi Qing shook his head. He asked for it. If it weren't for the Dragon God Palace, I would have killed him. Qin Feiyang snorted coldly. You have a grudge with the 10th elder? Yi Qing looked at him suspiciously. Yes. When I left the North Sea and entered the North, I was intercepted by him, and I had already killed him. Unfortunately, he left his divine consciousness on the divine Dragon Island, so I didn't really get rid of him. Qin Feiyang shook his head regretfully. I see. Yi Qing nodded and smiled. Thank you. What are you thanking me for? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yi Qing said. Of course. Thank you for saving my old father. Speaking of this matter, I really have to blame you for it. You don't trust me that much. If you had told me the truth when you left the Dragon God Palace, would it have taken so long? If I hadn't happened to meet Yi Shui, you would have regretted it for the rest of your life. Qin Feiyang glared at him. Yes. It's my fault. Yi Qing smiled bitterly and said, Shui also told us about how she saved you. This is fate. Qin Feiyang asked. Then does she know that I am Qin Feiyang? No. Yi Qing shook his head. That's good. Qin Feiyang nodded. However, you have to be careful of my big brother. He will probably set a trap to lure you out. Yi Qing said. With you as my spy, what am I afraid of? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. I can't know everything, so it's better to be careful. And just now, before entering the Dragon God Palace, I also asked my big brother, is it worth it to work for the dragons? Yi Qing asked. How did he answer? Qin Feiyang was stunned and hurriedly asked. He didn't say anything. This big brother of mine, although I grew up with him, I never knew what he was thinking in his heart. Yi Qing shook his head. Then it seems that it won't be easy to persuade him. Do we really have to make a move? Qin Feiyang muttered. Make a move? Yi Qing was surprised. You should understand a principle. If you can't be friends, you can only be enemies. Qin Feiyang said. Yi Qing's heart trembled. The meaning of this was very obvious. If they couldn't be friends, they could only be eliminated. But don't worry, I will try my best to persuade him. After all, he is not only your big brother now, but also my master in name. I can't do something like deceiving my master. If there's a chance, you should talk to him more and see what he is thinking in his heart. Qin Feiyang smiled. N. Yi Qing nodded and said, If there's nothing else, I will return to the assignment hall first. Go. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Yi Qing turned and left. Wait. Qin Feiyang suddenly spoke with a thoughtful look in his eyes. What's wrong? Yi Qing turned back and looked at him. Qin Feiyang raised his head and asked, Your cultivation is at the Great Perfection 9th Heaven stage, right? Yes. Yi Qing nodded. Then go find your big brother and ask him to send someone to guard the first island. Qin Feiyang said. Why? If I guard the first island, it will bring you a lot of convenience. Yi Qing was puzzled. If it was before, you would indeed bring me a lot of convenience by guarding the first island. But now there is no need for that. Now, I am your big brother's disciple. Who dares to cause trouble for me? Qin Feiyang smiled. Yi Qing was stunned. According to what you said, I have lost my value. The value of a person is endless. I made this arrangement because I want you to enter the Black Tortoise world to cultivate in seclusion. Now that you have opened the door of potential, you have been reborn in all aspects. In addition to the Fire Lotus Hui, Feng Daji, and the guidance of a group of heaven-defying divine artifacts, I believe that it will not be long before you can step into the imperishable stage. Qin Feiyang smiled. So that's how it is. Okay, I will go find my big brother tomorrow morning. Yi Qing came to a sudden realization. Then he happily turned around and left. In fact, Qin Feiyang's plan was very simple. First of all, Yi Qing followed him, so he must be responsible for Yi Qing. Moreover, Yi Qing was the one who asked him to use the slave seal to control him. With this sincerity, he would not let Yi Qing down. Second of all, the higher Yi Qing's cultivation, the more weight he would have in Yi Zhong's heart, and the chances of persuading Yi Zhong in the future would naturally be greater. At the same time, Yi Zhong arrived at the enforcement hall and entered a large hall. The snow python was lying on the floor of the hall. Yi Zhong glanced at the snow python, then raised his head to look at the sleepy young man lying on the snow python's back and said with a hoarse smile, Can we talk? Chapter 2539. The young man did not open his eyes and said indifferently, "What's there to talk about between us?" Yi Zhong did not mind. He walked to the chair beside him and sat down. He smiled and said, "You should already know that I took Li Bu as my disciple." And the young man said, Yi Zhong smiled and said, "I'm Li Bu-er's master and you're his friend. Now we're considered family." The young man slowly opened his eyes and yawned. He looked at Yi Zhong and said, "You must have misunderstood. We're not friends." "Not friends?" Yi Zhong was slightly stunned and said suspiciously, "If you're not friends, why are you helping him?" "I'm helping him because he's a very courageous person," the young man said lazily. "Why do you say that?" Yi Zhong was curious. "Why do you ask when you already know the answer? Do you dare say that you don't know what happened in the plains?" Although his cultivation is nothing much, he dared to openly challenge the dragon's messenger. Most importantly, he did not kneel in the face of the pressure from the dragon's messenger. This young master admires this very much. The young man said indifferently. Yi Zhong nodded and said with a smile, "It seems that I wasn't wrong. He's indeed a talent. I don't know if he's a talent, but he has some backbone." After saying that, the young man closed his eyes. Yi Zhong looked at the young man and did not say anything else. He turned and left. The purpose of his visit was to confirm the relationship between the two of them. Now that he had achieved his goal, there was naturally no need to continue staying. The next day, Yi Cheng came to Qin Feiyang and entered the ancient castle to cultivate. As for the person who replaced him to guard the first island, it was an elder of the tribunal council. Time flew by. Half a month passed. Qin Feiyang had been cultivating in seclusion for half a month. However, half a month outside was equivalent to 1,500 years in the ancient castle and the Black Tortoise world. The current Black Tortoise world was about the same size as the North region. Of course, this did not include the Heavenly Dragon Sea. After all, just the Heavenly Dragon Sea was several times larger than the northern region. The number of humans and ferocious beasts in the Black Tortoise world had also multiplied after hundreds of thousands of years of development. Furthermore, the Fire Lotus also divided the Black Tortoise world into 4 regions. They were the Eastern Domain, Western Domain, Northern Domain, and Southern Domain. The 4 great domains were centered around the Devil's Land. In the eyes of the living beings of the Black Tortoise world, the demonic land was no longer just a forbidden area, because now they all knew that Qin Feiyang lived in the Devil's Land. So now, with Pai Lupi and Theta Wang giving the orders, no one dared to enter the Devil's Land again. Of course. After all these years of discoveries, the Black Tortoise world's spirit veins and crystal veins had grown to an astonishing level. For example, the Devil's Land had already given birth to several level 7 God class soul veins and crystal veins. The current Black Tortoise world was a paradise. That morning, a white-clothed woman walked up the stone steps. Who is she? So beautiful. Wait. I think I've seen her before. Half a month ago, she went to find Li Bu. When the passing disciples saw the white-clothed woman, they couldn't take their eyes off her. This Li Bu. What kind of luck did he have? It feels like all the good things have fallen on his head. Several people were envious and jealous. The white-clothed woman ignored everything and walked to the entrance of the Dragon God Palace. Grandfather, in the square, Yi Zhong sat cross-legged on the ground. The white-clothed woman looked at Yi Zhong and called out softly, "That's right." The white-clothed woman was Yi Shui. What? Grandfather? What's the situation? When they heard how Yi Shui addressed Yi Zhong, several disciples were shocked. Yi Zhong was slightly stunned, opened his eyes, turned his head to look at Yi Shui, standing outside the door, and asked suspiciously, "Shui, why are you here?" "Great-grandfather asked me to come to the Dragon God Palace to explore." Yi Shui said helplessly. Hearing this, Yi Zhong couldn't help but smile bitterly, got up and walked to Yi Shui's side, looked at the stunned disciples and frowned. "What are you looking at?" Their faces changed, and they immediately turned and ran. Yi Zhong retracted his gaze, lowered his head to look at Yi Shui, and said angrily, "Aren't you messing around? Hurry up and go back. Do I dare to disobey great-grandfather's orders? Why don't you go and talk to great-grandfather?" Yi Shui said in distress. In fact, she didn't want to come to the Dragon God Palace, because she was very disgusted with the Dragon God Palace's atmosphere of scheming and fighting for fame and fortune. Yi Zhong couldn't help but be distressed. He knew the old man's personality better than Yi Shui. As long as the old man decided on something, even 10 cows couldn't pull him back. "Shao! This old man is here to find you." Suddenly, an old voice sounded at the bottom of the stone stairs. The grandfather and grandson were stunned, looked down and saw a red-haired old man dressed in dirty clothes with messy hair, as if he had a chicken coop on his head, running up. Initial immortal level. Yi Zhong's pupils shrank. What? He's an initial immortal level. Yi Shui was surprised. Yes. Yi Zhong nodded. Initial immortal level. Grandpa, your cultivation is stronger than his. There's no need to be so surprised, right? Yi Shui said telepathically. This old man's cultivation is indeed stronger than his, but this old man has never seen him before. Yi Zhong frowned. Even you haven't seen him before? Yi Shui was surprised. That's why Grandpa finds it unbelievable. There's actually someone this old man hasn't seen before. Yi Zhong whispered, "Shao, where are you?" The red-haired old man shouted as he rushed to the top of the stone stairs. "You are." Yi Zhong shielded Yi Shui, behind him, and looked at the red-haired old man. The red-haired old man was stunned, looked at Yi Zhong, grabbed his messy hair, and said, "You seem to be Yi Zhong? You know this old man?" Yi Zhong was surprised. The red-haired old man picked his nose and said sloppily, "Who doesn't know the Grand Hall Master of the Dragon God Palace?" "Then you are." Yi Zhong was suspicious. "This old man is just a wild crane, not worth mentioning." "I'm Shao, do you know him?" The red-haired old man said. "Wild crane?" Yi Zhong was stunned and asked suspiciously, "Who's Shao?" "Shao is Li Bu. I heard that he's quite famous in the Dragon God Palace recently. This stinking brat is quite promising. He didn't embarrass this old man." The red-haired old man smiled proudly. "Li Bu?" Yi Zhong and Yi Shui looked at each other. Yi Zhong looked at the red-haired old man for a while and asked, "You can't be Li Xiao Yao, right?" "How did you know?" The red-haired old man was stunned. "Really?" Yi Zhong's mouth twitched and said with a smile, "Li Bu said it before." When he heard the name Li Xiao Yao from Qinfang, he always thought that this should be an old man with a sage-like demeanor. But he didn't expect that it would be such a person. This dirty and messy image was really surprising. "Grandpa, who is Li Xiao Yao?" Yi Shui looked at Yi Zhong suspiciously. At that time, when Yi Zhong asked Qinfang, Yi Shui and the old man in linen were cooking inside, so only Yi Zhong and Yi Qing knew. Yi Zhong coughed and said with a smile, "He's the one who raised Li Bu." "Oh, it's you. Hello, Uncle Li. I'm Yi Shui, Li Bu's friend." Yi Shui bowed to the red-haired old man obediently. "You're Shao Er's friend?" TSK. This kid is finally enlightened. Not bad, not bad. You're a perfect match for my kid." The red-haired old man looked at Yi Shui and commented on her, chuckling. Yi Shui's cheeks turned red immediately, and she hurriedly said, "Uncle Li, you've misunderstood. We're just friends." "No need to explain. No need to explain. I understand." The red-haired old man's smile was extremely ambiguous. Yi Shui, or was extremely helpless. Yi Zhong's face was also extremely ugly. He coughed hard and said, "Brotherly, it's better not to talk about young people's affairs." "What do you mean? From what you're saying, my Xiao heir isn't good enough for your girl." The red-haired old man raised his eyebrows. Yi Zhong's face twitched, and he said that, "Are you looking for Li Bu or for something?" "Of course, there's something. I heard that he has a master. I'd like to see who's qualified to be his master." The red-haired old man looked at Yi Zhong expressionlessly. Cough, cough. Yi Zhong's expression turned increasingly awkward. So, this old man was here to cause trouble for him? Yi Shui glanced at Yi Zhong, then at the red-haired old man and said with a smile, "Uncle Li, my grandfather is Li Bu-er's master." "So it's you." The red-haired old man looked at Yi Zhong strangely. "That's right. I should be qualified, right?" Yi Zhong said, "It's not up to you to decide. Although your cultivation is not bad, your character is not good. That's why I object." The red-haired old man said indifferently, "My character is not good?" Yi Zhong frowned. "That's right. Don't blame me for my harsh words. I'm just that straightforward. I don't like to beat around the bush. Your cultivation is indeed strong, but you're willing to be the dragon's lackey. Do you know how the world scolds you behind your back? Lackey, lackey, scum of the human race. If Xiao takes you as his master, doesn't that mean he's also the dragon's lackey? I don't want Xiao to bear such a bad name for the rest of his life." The red-haired old man snorted coldly. When Yi Zhong heard this, his face turned extremely ugly. Yi Shui also glared at the red-haired old man angrily. Although her grandfather was indeed working for the dragons, to be scolded so mercilessly in front of his face, anyone would be angry. Whether you like to hear it or not, this is the truth. Although I'm an idle person who doesn't like to care about the grudges between humans and dragons, I still want to save my face. I don't want to be scolded behind my back when I walk on the streets in the future. Hey, look, isn't that the person who raised Li Bu? Look, he raised a lackey. Forget it. There's no point in telling you. Can I trouble you to call Xiao out? I want to teach him a lesson. What did I tell him before I left? A person must have a backbone and not curry favor with those in power. Have you forgotten it in the blink of an eye?" The red-haired old man said angrily, blowing his beard and glaring. Chapter 2540. Yi Zhong was so angry that his face turned red. The moment he came, he humiliated him, not giving him any face at all. "Uncle Li, you're Li Bu heir's relative. We respect you, but please respect us too." Yi Shui looked at the red-haired old man and said, "Girl, I think you still don't understand one thing. You have to be self-disciplined and have a clear conscience to gain the respect of others." The red-haired old man said indifferently. Yi Shui was speechless. Even though this person looked rude and unreasonable, every word that he said seemed to make sense if one thought about it carefully. "So, you came to the Dragon God Palace today to find trouble with me?" Yi Zhong said, "I wouldn't dare. You're a major Undying Realm expert. I'm a beginner imperishable, but in front of you I'm like an ant." The red-haired old man said, "Don't be so sarcastic. Do you know that I took Li Bu heir as my disciple to save him?" Yi Zhong said in a deep voice, "Save him?" The red-haired old man frowned. "It seems that you didn't inquire about the details. If it weren't for me, Li Bu heir might have died in the hands of the dragons. Tell me the truth. I don't have a good impression of Li Bu heir, but I can't help it. He's my benefactor." Yi Zhong's benefactor. Yi Zhong said, "Benefactor? What's going on?" The red-haired old man frowned. "He saved my father's life. Otherwise, do you think I would help him?" Yi Zhong sneered. I didn't expect you to be someone who knows how to repay kindness. The red-haired old man was stunned. Have you had enough? Don't push your luck, Yi Zhong said angrily. Don't be angry, don't be angry. Since you're helping him, then let's forget about this matter. But I still hope that you can think about it. After all, you still have a granddaughter. You can't let your granddaughter be criticized by others when she goes out in the future. All right then. I'll be leaving first. Help me tell the waiter that no matter what he does, he has to live up to his conscience. After the red-haired old man finished speaking, he turned around and waved his hand, leaving without looking back. Leaving just like that, Yi Shui stared at the red-haired old man's back in shock. Yi Zhong clenched his fists tightly, a cold light flashing in his eyes. If it wasn't for Li Bu, it would be impossible for him to leave this place alive. After the red-haired old man left, he flew to the top of a mountain and looked around. Suddenly, he chuckled and took out a facial restoration pill and popped it into his mouth. Very soon, a familiar face appeared. Who else could it be but Hui? Actually, as early as half a month ago, Qin Feiyang had Hui come out on the way back to the Dragon God Palace. His purpose was to put on this show in front of Yi Zhong, and at the same time, to interrogate Yi Zhong's conscience. Where should we go next? How about looking for the five-clawed golden dragon? Let's do that. It's a good time to meet those three young lords. Hui smirked, opened an altar, and left. Above the stone stairs, Yi Shui retracted her gaze and looked at the angry Yi Zhong, whispering, Grandpa, don't be angry. I did all this to save Li Bu. But he humiliated me without any explanation. How can I not be angry? Yi Zhong shouted. He's also concerned about Li Bu. Yi Shui laughed. You can insult others just because you care about them? Yi Zhong was very angry. Who did he offend? Yi Shui shook her head and smiled bitterly. This Li Xiao Yao was really difficult to get along with. Yi Zhong suddenly looked at Yi Shui and said, Shui, do you also think that it's a shame for Grandpa to work for the dragons? Grandpa, what are you thinking about? I've never thought of it that way. Yi Shui hurriedly said, Really? Yi Zhong looked at her and asked, Really? I know that Grandpa must have his own reasons for doing this. So no matter what, I'll support you silently behind your back. Yi Shui smiled. Thank you. Yi Zhong rubbed Yi Shui's head and smiled happily. Yi Shui giggled and asked, Then what about me entering the Dragon God Palace? Who dares to go against the old master's decision? Yi Zhong sighed helplessly, took out the milky white token, and handed it to Yi Shui. You know how important this token is. Take good care of it. You've given me the token. What about you? Yi Shui was stunned and asked, I'll ask for another one from the revered dragon. Coincidentally, I have something to do and need to make a trip to the divine Dragon Island. You go in first. As for Li Bu, it's better for you to keep a distance from him, lest others misunderstand. After Yi Zhong finished speaking, he rushed down the stone stairs. Misunderstand? Yi Shui was stunned and shook her head with a bitter smile. That's right. Wasn't she already misunderstood? I didn't expect her to be the Grand Hall Master's granddaughter. What a surprise. No wonder she went to find Li Bu. Li Bu is the Grand Hall Master's disciple, so she and Li Bu can be considered family. I'm still a little envious. As the saying goes, the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. If this Li Bu were to win her heart, he would truly have a meteoric rise. When Yi Shui entered the first island, she immediately caused a commotion. Her identity had also been spread around by those disciples, and everyone knew about it. In the valley, outside the cave, Qin Feiyang looked at Yi Shui, who descended from the sky and said, "Why are you here at the Dragon God Palace again? Why am I not welcome?" Yi Shue smiled sweetly. "I'm not the master of the Dragon God Palace, so what if I'm welcome? So what if I'm not welcome?" Qin Feiyang shook his head. Yi Shue smiled and said, "I just saw Uncle Li Xiaoyao." "Really? Where is he now?" Qin Feiyang looked very excited. "He left again." Yi Shue shrugged. "Left?" Qin Feiyang's expression froze, and he said angrily, "That bastard old man, he didn't even come to see me." "Bastard old man?" Yi Shue was stunned and said speechlessly, "Is it appropriate for you to say that?" "He's a bastard old man to begin with. What's wrong with that?" Qin Feiyang coldly snorted. Yi Shue couldn't help but laugh, shook her head and said, "He just scolded my grandfather." "It can't be." Qin Feiyang asked nervously, "What did he say?" "It's nothing. It's just that my grandfather is the dragon's dog." Yi Shue said. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched slightly. Wait, this guy was really bold. Yi Shue smiled and said, "Don't worry, grandfather didn't care much." "That's good." Qin Feiyang breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Then where is master now?" "He went to Divine Dragon Island." Yi Shue said. Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank and he asked calmly, "Why did master go to Divine Dragon Island?" "It seems like there's something, but I'm not sure what it is." Yi Shue shook her head. Qin Feiyang didn't ask any more and said, "Then why did you come to the Dragon God Palace?" Yi Shue smiled and said, "From now on, we're from the same sect. Please take care of me, little junior brother." "Same sect?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "Surprised?" Yi Shue said. "Quite surprised." Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled and said jokingly, "But the word little junior brother is inappropriate, right?" "Why is it inappropriate?" Yi Shue looked at him in confusion. Qin Feiyang said playfully, "No matter what, I'm your grandfather's disciple. According to seniority, I'm from the same generation as your father. Shouldn't you dream on?" Without waiting for Qin Feiyang to finish, Yi Shue glared at him fiercely. Then she scanned the valley and said, "From now on, let's be neighbors." "What?" Qin Feiyang was shocked. Neighbors? Did that mean that Yi Shue also wanted to place her cave abode in this valley? How could that be? With all his secrets, it would be too dangerous if he stayed with Yi Shue all the time. "Why, I'm such a beautiful woman, and you don't welcome me." Yi Shue frowned. Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched, and he said speechlessly, "This is the first time I've heard someone praise themselves as a beautiful woman." "Then can you deny it?" Yi Shue looked at him mockingly. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. He couldn't deny that Yi Shue was indeed beautiful. She was like a snow lotus, sacred and elegant. However, they couldn't be neighbors. "Shue, look, your master's granddaughter. You have a noble status. How can you live in such a place? Your cave abode must be on the 10th island. Only the 10th island is worthy of you," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "Aren't you grandfather's disciple too? If you can live here, why can't I? Besides, grandfather asked you to go to the 10th island. Didn't you refuse?" Yi Shue pouted. Qin Feiyang didn't know how to respond for a moment. "Cut the crap. Hurry up and help me open up a cave abode." Yi Shue scanned the valley and finally pointed at the opposite side of Qin Feiyang's cave abode. "Let's do it there. Aren't you afraid that others will misunderstand that there's something between us?" Qin Feiyang was helpless. "What's there to be afraid of?" Yi Shue said with a faint smile. Qin Feiyang sighed silently. It seemed that this woman was determined to build her cave abode in the valley. Wait a minute. This woman couldn't have been ordered by Yi Zhong to spy on him, right? That didn't seem right. The woman in white and the 10th elder had already verified his identity. Hua-yi had also disguised himself as Li Xiaorao to look for Yi Zhong. No matter how cautious someone was, they would definitely believe it. It seems that I have to change my paranoia. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself and flew to the opposite side, helplessly to open up a cave abode for Yi Shui. Yi Shui stood at the side and looked at him with a smile. Hey, don't just watch. Come and help. Whose cave abode will it be? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Yi Shui said with a smile, I'm just a weak woman. How dare you ask me for help? You're weak? Qin Feiyang's face darkened. Her cultivation was higher than his, but she was weak? Women were indeed the most difficult creatures to deal with in this world. A moment later, the cave abode was finally opened. Next, you can slowly arrange it. Also, if there's nothing else, don't look for me on the opposite side. I have to cultivate in peace. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he didn't wait for Yi Shui's reply and rushed into his cave abode. Am I that scary? Yi Shui turned around and looked at the cave abode on the opposite side in a daze. She couldn't help but doubt her charm. Chapter 2541. Qin Feiyang sealed the cave with his divine power, shook his head and entered the castle. Qin Dage, looks like lunatic was right. You're in trouble. Fire Lotus covered her mouth and chuckled. Since when did you learn to talk nonsense? Qin Feiyang couldn't help but roll his eyes. Isn't that the truth in front of you? How is it nonsense? Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Fine. Fine, I'm afraid of you. I'm going to cultivate now. Do whatever you want. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he went straight into the cultivation room. Fire Lotus shook her head and chuckled. It was rare to see Qin Feiyang in such a sorry state. The granddaughter of the Grand Hall Master came to the Dragon God Palace? Are you sure? Of course. I also heard that she's living with Li Bu-er on the first island. What the hell? Living with Li Bu-er? Ahem. No, I didn't make it clear. Yi Shui lives opposite Li Bu-er. They're just neighbors. I knew it. How can they live together? Let's go. Let's go to the first island and meet the granddaughter of the Grand Hall Master. We'll have to depend on her in the future. After knowing Yi Shui's identity, the geniuses of the 10th island couldn't sit still and came to the first island. In an instant, the first island was unprecedentedly lively. However, no matter how talented they were, Yi Shui refused to let them in. Because of Yi Shui's identity, no one dared to force their way in. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. Why don't I stay here and cultivate too? Good idea. I'll stay too. Me too. All of them persevered and fought for territory in the valley to open up cave residences. In less than 2 days, the entire area of the valley was filled with caves. There were probably tens of thousands of people. When Qin Feiyang found out about this, he was both angry and helpless. Originally, he was the only one in this area. It was especially quiet and comfortable. But now, in the blink of an eye, there were actually several tens of thousands more people. It was even livelier than the downtown area. But there was nothing he could do about it, because the Dragon God Palace's cave abode was arranged by him. Even if someone else was next to him, he couldn't do anything about it. However, since they were both from the first island, it was understandable. However, the people from the other islands were also staying on the first island. Was this in line with the rules? Why didn't the law-enforcing elder who was in charge of the first island do anything about it? Divine Dragon Island. I object. I object too. Yi Zhong, your suggestion is basically handing over the treasures of the dragons to those lowly humans. In a large hall, the dragon sovereign sat on the throne above. His entire body was shrouded in mist, making it impossible to see his expression. However, the various ancestral dragons below were staring at Yi Zhong with righteous indignation. The young man in fiery clothes was also there, but at this moment his eyes were closed. He turned a deaf ear to the voices around him, as if he was taking a nap. This is just this old man's personal suggestion. If you don't agree, just pretend that this old man didn't say anything. Yi Zhong leaned on the chair, glanced at the various ancestral dragons, and said indifferently, "You shouldn't have this idea. The Underworld King's Hell is the treasure left by the dragon god to us dragons. Although we will suffer heavy losses every time we open it, the Underworld King's Hell has contributed greatly to our dragons being able to stand in the ancient world for countless years. Now that you want us to open it to the outside world, we definitely won't agree." The various ancestral dragons said. Yi Zhong was silent. The dragon sovereign suddenly spoke. "Yi Zhong, tell us the purpose of your suggestion." Yi Zhong said, "To be honest, this old man really can't think of a way to deal with Qin Fang. I didn't expect that it's because you're incompetent." Before Yi Zhong could finish, the youth in blood-red clothes sneered. "This old man is incompetent?" Yi Zhong raised his eyebrows and said, "This old man is incompetent, but at least this old man hasn't suffered a great loss in the hands of Qin Fang. But what about you?" "What did you say?" The youth in blood-red clothes suddenly stood up and stared at Yi Zhong with murderous intent. The other ancestral dragons also looked at Yi Zhong angrily. Yi Zhong's words were simply poking at their sore spot. Did this old man say anything wrong? For example, last time on the plains, you set up a trap to lure Qin Feiyang out. At that time, this old man said that Qin Feiyang isn't a fool and that this method wouldn't work. But you just didn't listen. You just had to go through so much trouble to do this. But what happened in the end? Not only did you fail to capture Qin Feiyang, but Old He and the others' bodies were instead destroyed by him. Qin Feiyang even snatched the Sunset Divine Bow and the other 3 heaven-defying divine weapons. This time, the root of the problem has already been sown. Because if it weren't for the betrayal of the 4 heaven-defying divine weapons, would Qin Feiyang have the ability to fight against you in the Eternal Sea? Similarly, if it weren't for the instigation of the 4 heaven-defying divine weapons, would the other 6 divine weapons have betrayed you? There's a good saying, one wrong step and the whole game will be lost. And this is the consequence of your arrogance. Yi Zhong scolded mercilessly. Although the ancestral dragons were angry, they had nothing to say. The youth in blood-red clothes suddenly laughed and said, "Old man Yi, save some face for them." The ancestral dragons glared at the youth in blood-red clothes angrily. However, the youth in blood-red clothes didn't open his eyes from beginning to end, so the ancestral dragons couldn't vent their anger. Face is earned by oneself, not given by others. Yi Zhong snorted coldly. How stubborn. The youth in blood-red clothes shook his head. That's enough. Yi Zhong, continue what you didn't finish before. Long Zun said, "Although Qin Feiyang is young, in terms of intelligence, I'm afraid even we can't compare to him. If we just search blindly, we won't be able to find him. Moreover, even if we find him, what can we do? Now, with the Sunset Divine Bow and the other heaven-defying divine weapons helping him, unless we take out the sovereign divine weapon, we can only be killed in front of him. But other than the dragon god, who can control the sovereign divine weapon? That's why I thought of the Nether King's Hell. First of all, the Nether King's Hell is an independent space. No matter how we fight in it, it won't affect the innocent." Yi Zhong was interrupted by the youth in blood-red clothes. He sneered and said, "So after all this time, you're worried about implicating those lowly humans. Yi Zhong, it seems like you're not that loyal to us dragons. What a joke. If an all-out war really breaks out, do you think Divine Dragon Island will be safe? Don't forget how Qin Feiyang broke the sovereign's divine realm." Yi Zhong said angrily. The youth in blood-red clothes flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Shut up! Let him finish!" The dragons shouted. The youth in blood-red clothes' expression changed slightly. He glared at Yi Zhong with resentment. Yi Zhong looked at him indifferently and continued. "Secondly, the Nether King's hell itself is very dangerous. We might not even need to do anything, and Qin Feiyang will die in there." "That's true." The youth in blood-red clothes nodded. "Lastly, this is the most important point. You all know the rules and restrictions of the Nether King's hell. We can't revive any heaven-defying divine weapons or use any heaven-defying divine arts. Even if we take them out, we will be attacked by the power of the rules. Therefore, I think that entering the Nether King's hell is the most effective and easiest way to get rid of Qin Feiyang." Yi Zhong finished in one breath and looked at Long Zuin, waiting for his decision. Long Zuin pondered for a moment and asked, "But what if we can't get rid of him in the Nether King's hell? What else can we do? If we can't kill him in the Nether King's hell, it means that his ability is above that of the dragons. When the time comes, we can only ask the dragon god for help." Yi Zhong shook his head and said, "Your father fell silent." The youth in blood-red clothes finally opened his eyes. He looked at the ancestral dragons and said with a smile, "No matter what you all think, I think Yi Zhong's plan is feasible." "Nonsense. Of course you think it's feasible. You and Yi Zhong are outsiders after all." The youth in blood-red clothes snorted. "All right, do as you wish. Pretend I didn't say anything." The youth in blood-red clothes closed his eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. "Since he's an outsider, I have no right to interfere with the matters of the dragons. Do as you see fit." After saying that, Yi Zhong also closed his eyes. "You," the youth in blood-red clothes stared at the two of them angrily. But before he could say anything, he felt a cold gaze locked on him. He froze and quickly looked at Long Zuin. "I'm sorry. If you dare to say anything else, I'll kill you," Long Zuin said with a murderous look. "Yes." The youth in blood-red clothes was stunned. He quickly responded respectfully and lowered his head in silence. Long Zuin turned to Yi Zhong and said, "Are you sure that Qin Feiyang will enter the Nether King's hell? Even Eternal Realm experts like us can't resist the temptation of the Nether King's hell. Do you think he can resist it?" Yi Zhong laughed. "Haha," Long Zuin laughed and nodded. "All right, I'll leave this matter to you." "Thank you for your support, Long Zuin." Yi Zhong stood up and bowed. "Go." Long Zuin waved his hand. "Then I'll take my leave first." After Yi Zhong finished speaking, he turned around and left quickly. "As an outsider, I don't have the face to stay here any longer. You can continue." The youth in blood-red clothes opened his eyes and said faintly. He then stood up and left. "Coming and going as they wish. What's wrong with them?" The youth in blood-red clothes grumbled unhappily. "You're the one who's wrong. Until now, you still haven't figured out how important they are to us dragons. Let me tell you, we dragons can live without you, but we can't live without them." Long Zuin shouted. "Why?" The youth in blood-red clothes said angrily. "Because they've comprehended the power of law, but none of you have. Now that you don't have any divine weapons, if you really fight with them, they can kill you instantly. Have some awareness." Long Zuin snorted. When the ancestral dragons heard this, they clenched their fists tightly. They were indignant, but they felt powerless in their hearts. That's right. For someone in the imperishable realm, the power of law was the true method. Chapter 2542. A few days later, a piece of news spread in the north. The dragons opened the Netherworld King's hell to the public. However, no one knew about the Netherworld King's hell. For a time, everyone was discussing what kind of place it was. Did it sound like it was something amazing? Another few days passed. Buzz. Qin Feiyang suddenly received a message. The person who sent him the message was Rin Xiaolan from the Treasure Pavilion. Is there an alchemy fire and an alchemy furnace? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. No. Rin Xiaolan shook her head, looking helpless. What's the matter? Qin Feiyang was suspicious, judging from Rin Xiaolan's expression. She seemed to have encountered some trouble? Rin Xiaolan sighed. I have been expelled from the Treasure Pavilion by the manager. What? Qin Feiyang was surprised. A few days ago, a legendary artifact suddenly went missing on the 10th floor. The manager said that I stole it and thus expelled me from the Treasure Pavilion. Ren Xiaolan lowered her head and said. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Then were you the one who took it? How could it be me? I didn't go to the 10th floor at all. Rin Xiaolan said aggrievedly. Qin Feiyang said, Then why did he insist that it was you? I don't know either. At that time, the manager didn't even give me a chance to explain. He just chased me out directly. However, at this point, Ren Xiaolan hesitated. However, what? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Although my identity is lowly, I have my self-esteem. After being expelled from the Treasure Pavilion, I was very indignant. I secretly swore that I must investigate it clearly. So these few days I ran around and used all my connections. Just last night, I finally found out the truth. Ren Xiaolan clenched her fists, her eyes full of anger. What truth? Qin Feiyang asked. Ren Xiaolan said, This was a trap set up by the manager. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and asked suspiciously, Why did he do that? Because of you. Ren Xiaolan sighed. Me? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes, you established a contract bridge with me and publicly announced that you would only trade with me. This caused the manager to feel very humiliated. Furthermore, he also thought that I was the one causing trouble. So he harbored a grudge in his heart and set up this scheme to expel me from the Treasure Pavilion. Ren Xiaolan said, I see. Qin Feiyang nodded in understanding. Young master, please don't misunderstand. I'm not blaming you. I just can't accept it. I didn't do anything wrong. What right do you have to charge me with a groundless crime and expel me from the Treasure Pavilion? Don't say that I'm not trying to curry favor with you. Even if I am, I'm doing it for the sake of the Treasure Pavilion. I hope to bring the greatest benefits to the Treasure Pavilion. Ren Xiaolan said indignantly. You don't have to explain. I understand. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. My words carry little weight. I can't do anything in front of a manager who holds great power. Young master, I'd like to ask for your help. I've never thought of returning to the Treasure Pavilion. I just want the manager to clear my name and publicly apologize to me. Rin Xiaolan said. Qin Feiyang glanced at Ren Xiaolan and lowered his head to ponder. Seeing this, Ren Xiaolan couldn't help but feel uneasy, because the man in front of her was not familiar with her. Even if he didn't help her, there was nothing she could do. But now, she couldn't find anyone else, because among the people she knew, no one had the status and ability of Qin Feiyang. A moment later, Qin Feiyang looked up at Rin Xiaolan and asked, Do you have any evidence that he framed you? No. Ren Xiaolan shook her head. Then, how did you find out that he framed you? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Ren Xiaolan said, A friend of mine who used to work in the Treasure Pavilion secretly told me. How did he find out? Qin Feiyang said. Rumors. The staff in the Treasure Pavilion all said so. Ren Xiaolan said. In other words, this is just the speculation of the staff in the Treasure Pavilion? Qin Feiyang frowned. Although it's just a guess, it must be right. Otherwise, why would the manager frame me? Ren Xiaolan said anxiously. Don't worry, don't worry. The manager is not an ordinary person, especially the manager of the Treasure Pavilion in the Holy Dragon City. He has a high position and power. To deal with such a person, it's useless to rely on rumors and slanders. You must have solid evidence. Qin Feiyang said lightly. Ran Xiaolan said, "The manager definitely won't admit to this kind of thing personally." "It's definitely impossible to make him admit it personally, but it's not like there's no other way." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "What way?" Ran Xiaolan looked at Qin Feiyang expectantly. Qin Feiyang didn't answer and said with a smile, "This matter is also because of me. I'll send someone to investigate. You just wait at home for the news." "Thank you, young master." Ran Xiaolan quickly bowed to thank him. Qin Feiyang smiled and turned off the image crystal. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Back then, he had said in public that he would only trade with Ran Xiaolan. But then the manager set up a trap to frame Ran Xiaolan. Wasn't he deliberately making him lose face? Wait and see. There will be a time when you cry. Qin Feiyang activated the image crystal again. Buzz. Very soon, a shadow appeared. It was Hui. "Where is he?" Qin Feiyang asked. "In the east with Xiao Jin," Hui said. Qin Feiyang stared blankly and asked in astonishment, "Why did you run to him?" "I'm not afraid that he won't be able to handle it well," Hui said with a smile. "I think you should go sightseeing now." Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. Hui looked a little embarrassed and coughed dryly. "Stop talking nonsense. Tell me, what's the matter?" "Go to the treasure pavilion in Holy Dragon City and help me deal with something." Qin Feiyang briefly explained the situation. "I see. Okay, I'll go there when I have time." Hui nodded. Qin Feiyang asked, "Did you find anything in the east?" "Yes. Those two people, one is called Du Yuntian and the other is called Wu Baichuan. Du Yuntian is the young lord of the west. Wu Baichuan is the young lord of the east. Both of them are at the perfected ninth heaven realm," Hui said with a smile. "Du Yuntian, Wu Baichuan," Qin Feiyang murmured. Hui said, "And we also found out the progress of their replacement of the city lord." Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, "How's the progress?" "After so long, the two of them have only replaced a dozen city lords." Hui joked. "So slow?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "Do you think everyone is like you, daring to come up with such a crazy plan? With their speed, they won't be able to complete the task without thousands or tens of thousands of years." Hui said. Qin Feiyang asked, "Did you find out who's behind them?" "Are you kidding? Even the dragons couldn't find out the identity of the other two emperors. How could Xiao Jin and I find out in such a short time?" Hui was speechless. "That's true." Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, "What about the divine generals behind them?" "I didn't find out." Hui shook his head. "It seems that it won't be easy to find out the identity of the two emperors. However, we can start with Du Yuntian and Wu Baichuan. As the representatives of the two emperors, they should know the true identity of the two emperors. Even if they don't know, the divine generals behind them must know." Qin Feiyang said, "I think so too." Hui nodded. "By the way, did you find out the identity of the young lord in the south?" Qin Feiyang asked. "Do we need to investigate this person?" Hui was stunned. The young lord in the south was obviously Lu Xingyang's representative. Therefore, he and Qin Feiyang could be considered allies. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "Know yourself and know your enemy, and you'll be foolproof." "Okay then, when Xiao Jin comes back, I'll ask him to go to the south first." Hui said. "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "Don't forget about the treasure pavilion in the Holy Dragon City. You're so concerned about Ren Xiaolan. Tell me honestly, do you like her?" Hui looked at Qin Feiyang playfully. "I say, can you be more serious? It's because of you that my relationship with Shangguan Qiu is so awkward now," Gushijia said. Qin Feiyang said angrily, "Don't be so ungrateful. I'm helping you. Do you understand? Shangguan Qiu is such a good woman. You're a typical person who doesn't know how lucky you are. Hua Yi snorted. Thank you. Don't make trouble for me. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but feel helpless. Hua Yi nodded and said, Okay. I'm being nosy, future brother-in-law. The more you say, the more ridiculous it is. Qin Feiyang turned off the image crystal directly. The matter between him and Shangguan Fenglan had not been resolved yet, and he was still in the mood to matchmake him and Shangguan Qiu. This person was really bored. Dong! Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Qin Feiyang put away the image crystal, looked at the stone door of the cultivation room, and asked, Who is it? Young lord, the immortal general is looking for you. Jiang Dafei's voice sounded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the stone door quickly opened. Jiang Dafei was standing outside. Jiang Dafei was holding the image crystal in his hand, and a man in black armor was floating above it. It was the immortal general. Jiang Dafei walked into the cultivation room and pointed the image crystal at Qin Feiyang. Young lord, how have you been? The immortal general chuckled. What are you doing? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. I've already asked the Qin Emperor. The Qin Emperor said that we should muddle along with the two young lords. The immortal general said, Muddle along? Qin Feiyang was stunned, then looked at the immortal general with a smile and did not say anything. Ahem, young lord, I'm not lying to you. These are the Qin Emperor's original words. The immortal general was very uncomfortable. He felt that Qin Feiyang's eyes seemed to have an inexplicable meaning. Qin Feiyang retracted his gaze and nodded. Got it. Is there anything else? The immortal general was a little uncomfortable when he heard this. Was he not going to pursue the matter? That was not right. When did the young lord become so easy to talk to? Is there anything else? Qin Feiyang asked. Yes. The immortal general came back to his senses and hurriedly said, The Qin Emperor also said that we should not go to the hell of the Nether King. The hell of the Nether King? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Jiang Dafei was also puzzled. Chapter 2543. Looking at Qin Feiyang's reaction, the divine general asked in surprise, You still don't know? Know what? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. It's the Nether King's hell. In the past few days, the news of the Nether King's hell has spread like wildfire in the north. Even the west, south, and east have spread, and you are in the Dragon God Palace, yet you still don't know. What have you been doing every day? The divine general was speechless. Is there a need to ask? Needless to say, I must have been hiding in the castle to cultivate. Qin Feiyang said. Jiang Dafei asked curiously, Lord Divine General, what exactly is this Nether King's hell? It's a long story. After the divine general finished speaking, he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, If you are interested, you can ask Yizhong. He knows about this. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded. You are now Yizhong's disciple. There are many opportunities to get close to him. You have to hurry up and complete the mission, the divine general reminded. I know, Qin Feiyang said. All right then, I won't disturb you anymore. The divine general smiled, and the shadow quickly dissipated. Qin Feiyang looked at Jiang Dafei and said, You can continue to cultivate as well. Yes, Jiang Dafei respectfully replied, put away the image crystal, and turned to walk out of the cultivation room. Nether King's hell. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and muttered, What kind of place was this? Suddenly, Qin Feiyang stood up and left the castle, appearing in the cave. When he walked out of the cave and looked at the cave inside and outside the valley, his expression couldn't help but be helpless. At this moment, 5 young men gathered outside Yishua's cave, whispering to each other, as if discussing how to meet Yishuar. These 5 people had extraordinary temperaments. Their cultivation was not weak either. Peak 9 Heaven's realm. With their powerful cultivation, they occupied the most advantageous place. The cave was right beside Yishui. However, even though they were close by, they had not even seen Yishui for the past few days. They had also tried many methods. For example, inviting Yishui out to play. Or he could find an excuse to look for Yishui to discuss cultivation. Anyway, as long as it was a method they could think of, they had already used it. However, from the beginning to the end, Yishui ignored them, which made them very angry. Cough, cough. Qin Feiyang clenched his fist and coughed dryly. Looking at the backs of the 5 people, he said, "Can you make way? Get lost. Can't you see we're busy?" The 5 of them shouted without even turning their heads. However, as soon as he finished reprimanding him, his expression froze. This voice, the 5 of them turned around at the same time and looked at Qin Feiyang. Their expressions changed immediately. "You're the ones who should get lost. In any case, I'm the first one to live here. You guys didn't even inform me before moving in. I want to ask, are you ignoring my existence?" Qin Feiyang looked at the 5 of them expressionlessly. "Li Bu, you've gone overboard. This is not your private territory. Why should we inform you?" One of them said unhappily. This was a young man in purple. He was handsome and tall, full of arrogance. Qin Feiyang was stunned. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he looked at the 5 of them and smiled. "You're still being arrogant with me? Don't misunderstand. We don't know him." Yes. We don't even know his name. He's the one who provoked you. You should look for him. It has nothing to do with us." Seeing that the situation was not good, the other 4 quickly took a few steps back, keeping a distance from the young man in purple. "You guys!" The young man in purple looked at the 4 of them angrily. The 4 of them ignored him. He cursed in his heart. "Are you stupid? Don't you know what kind of person Li Bu is? Aren't you looking for trouble by challenging him? Besides, Li Bu was Yi Zhong's disciple and had a close relationship with Yishui. Offending Li Bu was equivalent to offending Yishui. Only an idiot would stand with him if he could do such a stupid thing." Qin Feiyang glanced at the 5 of them, rolled up his sleeves, looked at the young man in purple and said, "What did you say just now? Say it again for me." "What do you want?" The young man in purple was panicking. "What do you think I want?" Qin Feiyang looked at him with a smile. His eyes were like a weasel looking at a chick. The young man in purple looked at the 4 of them for help. Seeing that the 4 of them were still ignoring him and were even gloating, he panicked even more. "I'm sorry. I didn't choose my words just now. Can you not be calculative with me? How about this? I'll give you a pinnacle divine artifact as a greeting gift." The young man in purple hurriedly said, "A pinnacle divine artifact? Are you trying to dismiss a beggar? Do I look like someone who lacks a pinnacle divine artifact?" Qin Feiyang smiled mockingly. The young man in purple's expression froze. That's right. Not only did this person obtain a supreme divine artifact in the Divine Weapon Pavilion, but he also obtained several legendary divine artifacts. Why would he care about a mere pinnacle divine artifact? How about this? I won't make things difficult for you. 100,000 soul stones a month. Just treat it as the rent. Qin Feiyang smiled. What? 100,000 a month? The rent? The young man in purple was dumbfounded. And he even treated this place as his private territory? How could there be such an unreasonable person? Do you think it's too little? 200,000 a month then. Qin Feiyang said. The young man in purple roared. Li Bu, you can't be so shameless. If you want to win the heart of a beauty, you have to pay a price. How can it be possible for a pie to fall from the sky, right? Qin Feiyong said with a smile. The young man in purple's face turned pale. How was this unreasonable? He was simply a scoundrel. The other four hid at the side and couldn't stop laughing at his misfortune. Don't laugh. Not only him. You guys have to pay the rent too. Not a word less. And not only you guys, everyone within a radius of 10,000 miles in this valley has to pay. Qin Feiyong looked at the four of them and said, What? The four of them were stunned. Did he really think that this was his backyard? It's settled then. I'll have to trouble you guys to help me collect the rent. If anyone doesn't pay, just chase them away. Qin Feiyong said to the five of them and walked toward Yi Shui's cave abode. The five of them twitched their faces. He actually asked them to help collect the rent? That was too much. Qin Feiyong ignored them and stopped outside the cave abode. He asked can I go in? There was a stone door in Yi Shui's cave abode. Boom! Not long after he said that, the stone door slowly opened. Their relationship is indeed extraordinary. Looking at this scene, the five of them were filled with envy. Do you see my relationship with Yi Shui? As long as you guys are obedient, I might even matchmake you guys together. Qin Feiyong smiled secretly at the five of them and strode into the cave abode. The five of them wanted to follow him in shamelessly. However, just as they reached the entrance, the stone door closed with a bang. The five of them were helpless. Do you guys believe him? The purple-robed young man asked. Believe what? The other four of them were suspicious. He will matchmake us together? The purple-robed young man said. As if we would believe him. It's obvious. Why wouldn't he do such a good thing himself and give it to us? The four of them sneered. What should we do then? Are we really going to help him collect the rent? The purple-robed young man frowned. Dream on. This isn't his territory. I'm not going. I want to see what he dares to do to me. That's right. Although he's the disciple of the Grand Hall Master, he can't be so unreasonable. However, we can join forces with others to suppress his arrogance. Good idea, let's go. The five of them left indignantly. In the cave abode, as soon as Qin Feiyong walked in, he realized that it was a completely different world. Yi Shui's cave abode was several times bigger than his. It was also beautifully decorated. The floor was covered with white jade, and there was not a speck of dust. There were also various ornaments carved from agate and jade hanging on the walls. There was even an independent living room, lounge, and cultivation room. There was also furniture. Qin Feiyong glanced at everything and shook his head. It's just a temporary residence. Is there a need for this? It was simply a waste of time to do all this. A woman's mind was indeed different from others. Don't use your man's mind to measure us women. Yi Shui was wearing a snow-white dress and sitting on a chair carved from mahogany, looking at Qin Feiyong. She looked like an otherworldly fairy. All right. Why don't you cut the crap? Do you know about hell? Qin Feiyong sat opposite Yi Shui, casually, and asked. Yi Shui was stunned and asked suspiciously, Why are you asking about this? Qin Feiyong smiled and said, Isn't everyone talking about it now, so I'm curious. A few days ago, I've already asked Grandpa, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he told me not to ask around. And he also told me to tell you not to mess around and stay in the Dragon God Palace to cultivate. Yi Shui said. Why? Qin Feiyong asked. Yi Shui's words were completely out of his expectations. I don't know either. Yi Shui shook her head and said, But since Grandpa said so, it must be for our own good. I admit that, but don't you think it's strange? There are so many people in the Dragon God Palace. Why are we not allowed to ask around? Qin Feiyong frowned. Nonsense. We are the people closest to him. Yi Shui said. The people closest to him? Qin Feiyong was slightly stunned and shook his head with a smile. You are the person closest to him. so I don't object. But I am just a disciple who has just become his disciple. Li Bu, I don't feel comfortable listening to your words. Is my grandpa not good to you? Although we have just known each other, be it great-grandpa or grandpa and the others, they all treat you as family. Yi Shuai said angrily, What about you? What kind of person do you take me for? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. Me, younger brother. Don't tell me you want to be my elder brother? Yi Shuai rolled her eyes. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, If you agree, I won't object. Dream on. Yi Shuai looked at him in disdain. His hair was not even fully grown, and he wanted to be her elder brother. Did he have any shame? That you're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.